Purgatory. Canto 1. O'er better waves to speed her rapid course, the light bark of my genius lifts the sail, well pleased to leave so cruel sea behind. And of that second region will I sing, in which the human spirit from sinful blot is purged, and for ascent to heaven prepares. Hear, O ye hallowed nine, for in your train I follow, hear the deadened strain revive, nor let Calliope refuse to sound a somewhat higher song, of that loud tone, which when the wretched birds of chattering note had heard, they of forgiveness lost all hope. Sweet hue of eastern sapphire, that was spread o'er the serene aspect of the pure air, high up as the first circle, to mine eyes unwonted joy renewed, soon as I scaped forth from the atmosphere of deadly gloom, that had mine eyes and bosom filled with grief. The radiant planet, that to love invites, made all the Orient laugh, and veiled beneath the Pisces light, that in his escort came. To the right hand I turned, and fixed my mind on the other pole attentive, where I saw 4 stars ne'er seen before, save by the ken of our first parents. Heaven of their rays seemed joyous. O thou northern sight, bereft indeed and widowed, since of these deprived. As from this view I had desisted, straight turning a little towards the other pole, there from whence now the wane had disappeared, I saw an old man standing by my side alone, so worthy of reverence in his look, that ne'er from son to father more was owed. Low down his beard and mixed with hoary white descended, like his locks, which parting fell upon his breast in double fold. The beams of those 4 luminaries on his face so brightly shone, and with such radiance clear decked it, that I beheld him as the sun. Say, who are ye, that stemming the blind stream, forth from the eternal prison house have fled? He spoke and moved those venerable plumes. Who hath conducted, or with lantern sure lights you emerging from the depth of night, that makes the infernal valley ever black? Are the firm statutes of the dread abyss broken, or in high heaven new laws ordained, that thus condemned ye to my cave's approach? My guide, then laying hold on me by words and intimations given with hand and head, made my bent knees and I submissive pay due reverence. Then thus to him replied, Not of myself I come. A dame from heaven descending had besought me in my charge to bring. But since thy will implies that more our true condition I unfold at large, mine is not to deny thee thy request. This mortal ne'er hath seen the farthest gloom, but erring by his folly had approached so near, that little space was left to turn. Then, as before I told, I was dispatched to work his rescue, and no way remained save this which I have ta'en. I have displayed before him all the regions of the bad, and purpose now those spirits to display, that under thy command are purged from sin. How I have brought him would be long to say. From high descends the virtue, by whose aid I to thy sight and hearing him have led. Now may our coming please thee. In the search of liberty he journeys, that how dear they know, who for her sake have life refused. Thou knowest to whom death for her was sweet in Utica, where thou didst leave those weeds, that in the last great day will shine so bright. For us the eternal edicts are unmoved. He breathes, and I am free of Minos's power, abiding in that circle where the eyes of thy chaste Marcia beam, who still in look praise thee, O hallowed spirit, to own her shine. Then by her love we implore thee, let us pass through thy 7 regions, for which best thanks I for thy favor will to her return, if mention there below thou not disdain. Marcia so pleasing in my sight was found, he then to him rejoined, while I was there, that all she asked me I was fain to grant. Now that beyond the accursed stream she dwells, she may no longer move me by that law, which was ordained me when I issued thence. Not so if dame from heaven, as thou sayest, moves and directs thee, then no flattery needs. Enough for me that in her name thou ask. Go therefore now, and with a slender reed see that thou duly gird him, and his face lave, till all sordid stain thou wipe from thence. For not with eye by any cloud obscured would it be seemly before him to come, who stands the foremost minister in heaven. This islet all around, there far beneath, where the wave beats it, on the oozy bed produces store of reeds. No other plant, covered with leaves or hardened in its stalk, there lives, not bending to the water's sway. After this way return not, but the sun will show you that now rises where to take the mountain in its easiest ascent. He disappeared, and I myself upraised speechless, and to my guide retiring close, toward him turned mine eyes. He thus began, "My son, observant thou my steps pursue. We must retreat to rearward, for that way the champaign to its low extreme declines." The dawn had chased the matin hour of prime, which deaf before it, so that from afar I spied the trembling of the ocean stream. We traversed the deserted plain, as one who wandered from his track thinks every step trodden in vain till he regain the path. When we had come, where yet the tender dew strove with the sun, and in a place where fresh the wind breathed o'er it, while it slowly dried, both hands extended on the watery grass my master placed, in graceful act and kind. Whence I of his intent before apprised, stretched out to him my cheeks suffused with tears. There to my visage he anew restored that hue, which the dun shades of hell concealed. Then on the solitary shore arrived, that never sailing on its waters saw man, that could after measure back his course, he girt me in such manner as had pleased him who instructed, and oh, strange to tell, as he selected every humble plant, wherever one was plucked, another there resembling straightway in its place arose. Canto 2. Now had the sun to that horizon reached, that covers, with the most exalted point of its meridian circle, Salem's walls, and night, that opposite to him her orb sounds, from the stream of Ganges issued forth, holding the scales, that from her hands are dropped when she reigns highest, so that where I was, Aurora's white and vermeil-tinctured cheek, to orange turned as she in age increased. Meanwhile we lingered by the water's brink like men who, musing on their road in thought journey, while motionless the body rests. When lo, as near upon the hour of dawn, through the thick vapors Mars with fiery beam glares down in west over the ocean floor, so seemed what once again I hoped to view, a light so swiftly coming through the sea, no winged course might equal its career, from which when for a space I had withdrawn thine eyes, to make inquiry of my guide, again I looked and saw it grown in size and brightness. Thou on either side appeared something, but what I knew not of bright hue, and by degrees from underneath it came another. My preceptor silent yet stood, while the brightness that we first discerned opened the form of wings. Then when he knew the pilot, cried aloud, "Down, down, bend low thy knees, behold God's angel, fold thy hands, now shalt thou see true ministers indeed. Lo how all human means he sets at naught, so that nor oar he needs, nor other sail except his wings between such distant shores. Lo how straight up to heaven he holds them reared, winnowing the air with those eternal plumes, that not like mortal hairs fall off or change." As more and more toward us came, more bright appeared the bird of God, nor could the eye endure his splendor near. I mine bent down. He drove ashore in a small bark so swift and light, that in its course no wave it drank. The heavenly steersman at the prow was seen, visibly written blessed in his looks. Within 100 spirits and more there sat. In exitu Israel de Egypto, all with one voice together sang, with what in the remainder of that hymn is writ. Then soon as with the sign of Holy Cross he blessed them, they at once leaped out on land, the swiftly as he came returned. The crew, there left, appeared astounded with the place, gazing around as one who sees new sights. From every side the sun darted his beams, and with his arrowy radiance from mid-heaven had chased the Capricorn, when that strange tribe, lifting their eyes towards us, "If ye know, declare what path will lead us to the mount." Them Virgil answered, "Ye suppose perchance us well acquainted with this place, but here, we as yourselves are strangers. Not long erst we came before you but a little space, by other roads so rough and hard, that now the ascent will seem to us as play." The spirits, who from my breathing had perceived I lived, grew pale with wonder, as the multitude flock round a herald, sent with olive branch, to hear what news he brings, and in their haste tread one another down. E'en so at sight of me those happy spirits were fixed, each one forgetful of its errand, to depart, where cleansed from sin it might be made all fair. Then one I saw darting before the rest with such fond ardour to embrace me, I to do the like was moved. O shadows vain except in outward semblance! Thrice my hands I clasped behind it, they as oft returned empty into my breast again. Surprise I needs must think was painted in my looks, for that the shadow smiled and backward drew. To follow it I hastened, but with voice of sweetness it enjoined me to desist. Then who it was I knew, and prayed of it. To talk with me, it would a little pause. It answered, Thee as in my mortal frame I loved, so loosed forth it I love thee still, and therefore pause. But why walkest thou here? Not without purpose once more to return, thou find'st me, my Casella, where I am journeying this way. I said, But how of thee hath so much time been lost? He answered straight, No outrage hath been done to me, if he who when and whom he chooses takes, me oft this passage hath denied, since of just will his will he makes. These 3 months past indeed, he who's chose to enter, with free leave hath taken, whence I wandering by the shore where Tiber's wave grows salt, of him gained kind admittance, at that river's mouth, toward which his wings are pointed, for there always throng all such as not to Archeron descend. Then I, if new laws have not quite destroyed memory and use of that sweet song of love, that while all my cares had power to swage, please thee with it a little to console my spirit, that encumbered with its frame, travelling so far of pain is overcome. Love that discourses in my thoughts. He then began in such soft accents that within the sweetness thrills me yet. My gentle guide and all who came with him so well were pleased, that seemed naught else might in their thoughts have room. Fast fixed in mute attention to his notes we stood, when lo, that old man venerable exclaiming, How is this, ye tardy spirits? What negligence detains you loitering here? Run to the mountain to cast off those scales, that from your eyes the sight of God conceal. As a wild flock of pigeons to their food collected, blade or tears, without their pride accustomed, and in still and quiet sort, if aught alarm them, suddenly desert their meal, assailed by more important care. So I that new-come troop beheld, the song deserting, hasten to the mountain's side, as one who goes yet where he tends knows not, nor with less hurried step did we depart. Canto 3. Them sudden flight had scattered over the plain, turned towards the mountain, whither reason's voice drives us. I to my faithful company adhering left it not, for how of him deprived might I have sped, or who beside would o'er the mountainous tract have led my steps, he with the bitter pang of self-remorse seemed smitten. O clear conscience and upright, how doth a little fling wound thee sore? Soon as his feet desisted, slackening pace, from haste that mars all decency of act, my mind that in itself before was wrapt, its thoughts expanded, as with joy restored, and full against the steep ascent I set my face, where highest to heaven its top o'erflows. The sun that flared behind with ruddy beam before my form was broken, for in me his rays resistance met. I turned aside with fear of being left, when I beheld only before myself the ground obscured. When thus my solace, turning him around, bespake me kindly, Why distrustest thou? Believ'st not I am with thee, thy sure guide? It now is evening there, where buried lies the body, in which I cast a shade removed to Naples from Brundusium's wall. Nor thou marvel if before me no shadow fall, more than that in the sky element one ray obstructs not other. To endure torments of heat and cold extreme, like frames that virtue hath disposed, which how it works wills not to us should be revealed. Insane who hopes, our reason may that space explore, which holds 3 persons in one substance knit. Seek not the wherefore, race of humankind. Could ye have seen the whole, no need had been for Mary to bring forth. Moreover, ye have seen such men desiring fruitlessly, to whose desires repose would have been given, that now but serve them for eternal grief. I speak of Plato, and the Stagirite, and others many more. And then he bent downwards his forehead, and in troubled mood broke off his speech. Meanwhile we had arrived far as the mountain's foot, and there the rock found of so steep ascent, that nimblest steps to climb it had been vain. The most remote, most wild, untrodden path, in all the tract twixt Laris and Turbia, were to this a ladder easy and open of access. Who knows on which hand now the steep declines, my master said and paused, so that he may ascend, who journeys without aid of wine. And while with looks directed to the ground the meaning of the pathway he explored, and I gazed upward round the stony height, of spirits that toward us moved their steps, yet moving seemed not, they so slow approached. I thus my guide addressed, Upraise thine eyes, lo that way some, of whom thou mayst obtain counsel, if of thyself thou find'st it not. Straightway he looked, and with free speech replied, Let us tend thither, they but softly come, and thou be firm in hope, my son beloved. Now was that people distant far in space, 1,000 paces behind ours, as much as at a throw the nervous arm could fling, when all drew backward on the messy crags of the steep bank, and firmly stood unmoved, as one who walks in doubt might stand to look. O spirits perfect, O already chosen, Virgil to them began, by that blessed peace, which as I deem is for you all prepared, instruct us where the mountain low declines, so that attempt to mount it be not vain, for who knows most, him loss of time most grieves. As sheep, that step from forth their fold by one or pairs or three at once, meanwhile the rest stand fearfully, bending the eye and nose to ground, and what the foremost does that do the others, gathering round her if she stops, simple and quiet, nor the cause discern. So saw I moving to advance the first, who of that fortunate crew were at the head, of modest mien and graceful in their gait. When they before me had beheld the light from my right side fall broken on the ground, so that the shadow reached the cave, they stopped, and somewhat back retired. The same did all, who followed, though unweeting of the cause. Unasked of you, yet freely I confess, this is a human body which ye see. That the sun's light is broken on the ground, marvel not, but believe that not without virtue derived from heaven, we to climb over this wall aspire. So them bespake my master, and that virtuous tribe rejoined, Turn, and before you there the entrance lies, making a signal to us with bent hands. Then of them one began, Whoe'er thou art, who journeyst thus this way, thy visage turn, think if me elsewhere thou hast ever seen. I towards him turned, and with fixed eye beheld. Comely and fair and gentle of aspect he seemed, but on one brow a gash was marked. When humbly I disclaimed to have beheld him ever, Now behold, he said, and showed high on his breast a wound, then smiling spake, I am Manfredi, grandson to the Queen Costanza, whence I pray thee, when returned, to my fair daughter go, the parent glad of Aragonia and Sicilia's pride, and of the truth inform her, if of me aught else be told. When by 2 mortal blows my frame was shattered, I betook myself weeping to him, who of free will forgives. My sins were horrible, but so wide arms hath goodness infinite, that it receives all who turn to it. Had this text divine been of Cosenza's shepherd better scanned, who then by Clement on my hunt was set, yet at the bridge's head my bones had lain, near Benevento, by the heavy mole protected. But the rain now drenches them, and the wind drives out of the kingdom's bounds, far as the stream of Verdi, where with lights extinguished he removed them from their bed. Yet by their curse we are not so destroyed, but that the eternal love may turn, while hope retains her verdant blossoms. True it is, that such one as in contumacy dies against the Holy Church, though he repent, must wander 30-fold for all the time in his presumption past. If such decree be not by prayers of good men shorter made, look therefore if thou canst advance my bliss, revealing to my good Costanza how thou hast beheld me, and beside the terms laid on me of that interdict, for here by means of those below much profit comes. Canto 4. When by sensations of delight or pain, that any of our faculties hath seized, entire the soul collects herself, it seems she is intent upon that power alone, and thus the error is disproved which holds the soul not singly lighted in the breast. And therefore, when as aught is heard or seen, that firmly keeps the soul toward it turned, time passes, and a man perceives it not. For that, whereby he hearken, is one power, another that, which the whole spirit hash. This is as it were bound, while that is free. This found I true by proof, hearing that spirit and wondering. For full 50 steps aloft the sun had measured unobserved of me, when we arrived where all with one accord the spirit shouted, Here is what ye ask. A larger aperture ofttimes is stopped with forked stake of thorn by villager, when the ripe grape embrowns, then was the path, by which my guide and I behind him close, ascended solitary, when that troop departing left us. On San Leo's road who journeys, or to Noli low descends, or mounts Bismantua's height must use his feet. But here a man had need to fly, I mean, with the swift wing and plumes of high desire, conducted by his aid who gave me hope, and with light furnished to direct my way. We through the broken rock ascended, close pent on each side, while underneath the ground asked help of hands and feet. When we arrived near on the highest ridge of the steep bank, where the plain level opened, I exclaimed, "O Master, say which way can we proceed?" He answered, "Let no step of thine recede. Behind me gain the mountain, till to us some practised guide appear." That eminence was lofty that no eye might reach its point, and the side proudly rising more than line from the mid-quadrant to the center drawn. I wearied thus began, "Parent beloved, turn and behold how I remain alone, if thou stay not. My son," he straight replied, "thus far put forth thy strength," and to a track pointed, that on this side projecting round circles the hill. His words so spurred me on, that I behind him clambering forced myself, till my feet pressed the circuit plain beneath. There, both together seated, turned we round to eastward, whence was our ascent, and oft many beside have with delight looked back. First on the nether shores I turned my eyes, then raised them to the sun, and wondering marked that from the left it smote us. Soon perceived that poet sage now at the car of light amazed I stood, where twixt us and the north its course it entered. Whence he thus to me, "Were Leda's offspring now in company of that broad mirror, that high up and low imparts his light beneath, thou mightst behold the ruddy zodiac nearer to the bear's wheel, if its ancient course it not forsook. How that may be if thou wouldst think, within pondering imagine Sion with this mount placed on the earth, so that to both be one horizon and two hemispheres apart, where lies the path that Phaeton ill knew to guide his erring chariot. Thou wilt see how of necessity by this on one he passes, while by that on the other side, if with clear view shine intellect attend." "Of truth, kind teacher," I exclaimed, "so clear aught saw I never, as I now discern where seemed my ken to fail, that the mid-orb of the supernal motion, which in terms of art is called the equator, and remains ever between the sun and winter, for the cause thou hast assigned, from hence toward the north departs, when those who in the Hebrew land inhabit see it towards the warmer part. But if it please thee, I would gladly know how far we have to journey, for the hill mounts higher than this sight of mine can mount." He thus to me, "Such is this steep ascent, that it is ever difficult at first, but more a man proceeds, less evil grows. When pleasant it shall seem to thee, so much that upward going shall be easy to thee. As in a vessel to go down the tide, then of this path thou wilt have reached the end. There hope to rest thee from thy toil. No more I answer, and thus far for certain know." As he his words had spoken, near to us a voice there sounded, "Yet ye first perchance may to repose you by constraint be led." At sound thereof each turned, and on the left a huge stone we beheld, of which nor I nor he before was ware. Thither we drew, find there were some, who in the shady place behind the rock were standing, as a man through idleness might stand. Among them one, who seemed to me much wearied, sat him down, and with his arms did fold his knees about, holding his face between them downward bent. "Sweet sir," I cried, "behold that man who shows himself more idle than if laziness were sister to him." Straight he turned to us, and o'er the thigh lifting his face observed, then in these accents spake, "Up then, proceed thou valiant one." Straight who it was I knew, nor could the pain I felt, for want of breath still somewhat urged me, hinder my approach. And when I came to him, he scarce his head uplifted, saying, "Well hast thou discerned, how from the left the sun his chariot leads." His lazy acts and broken words my lips, to laughter somewhat moved, when I began, "Belacqua, now for thee I grieve no more, but tell why thou art seated upright there. Waitest thou escort to conduct thee hence, or blame I only shine accustomed ways?" Then he, "My brother, of what use to mount, when to my suffering would not let me pass the bird of God, who at the portal sits? Behooves so long that heaven first bear me round without its limits, as in life it bore. Because I to the end repentant sighs delayed, if prayer do not aid me first, that riseth up from heart which lives in grace. What other kind avails, not heard in heaven?" Before me now the poet up the mount ascending cried, "Haste thee, for see the sun has touched the point meridian, and the night now covers with her foot Morocco's shore." Canto 5. Now had I left those spirits and pursued the steps of my conductor, when beheld, pointing the finger at me, one exclaimed, "See how it seems as if the light not shone from the left hand of him beneath, and he, as living, seems to be led on." Mine eyes I at that sound reverting, saw them gaze through wonder first at me, and the light broken underneath, by turns. "Why are thy thoughts thus riveted?" my guide exclaimed, "that thou hast slacked thy pace? Or how imports it thee what thing is whispered here? Come after me, and to their babblings leave the crowd. Be as a tower that firmly set, shakes not its top for any blast that blows. He in whose bosom thought on thought shoots out, still of his aim is wide, in that the one sicklies and wastes to naught the other's strength." What other could I answer, save I come? I said it, somewhat with that colour tinged which oft-times pardon meriteth for man. Meanwhile, traverse along the hill there came, a little way before us, some who sang the miserere in responsive strains. When they perceived that through my body I gave way not for the rays to pass, their song straight to a long and hoarse exclaim they changed, and two of them, in guise of messengers, ran on to meet us, and inquiring asked, "Of your condition we would gladly learn." To them my guide, "Ye may return, and bear tidings to them who sent you, that his frame is real flesh. If, as I deem to view his shade, they paused, enough is answered them. Him let them honour, they may prize him well. Ne'er saw I fiery vapours with such speed cut through the serene air at fall of night, nor august clouds athwart the setting sun, that upward these did not in shorter space return, and there arriving with the rest wheel back on us, as with loose rein a troop. Many, exclaimed the bard, are these who throng around us. To petition thee they come. Go therefore on, and listen as thou goest. O spirit, who goest on to blessedness with the same limbs that clad thee at thy birth. Shouting they came, a little rest thy step. Look if thou any one amongst our tribe hast e'er beheld, that tidings of him there thou mayst report. Ah, wherefore goest thou on? Ah, wherefore tarriest thou not? We all by violence died, and to our latest hour were sinners, but then warned by light from heaven, so that repenting and forgiving we did issue out of life at peace with God, who with desire to see him fills our heart. Then I, the visages of all I scan, yet none of ye remember, but if aught that I can do may please you, gentle spirits, speak, and I will perform it by that peace, which on the steps of guides so excellent following from world to world intent I seek. In answer he began, None here distrusts thy kindness, though not promised with an oath, so as the will fail not for want of power. Whence I, whose soul before the others speak, entreat thee, if thou ever see that land, which lies between Romagna and the realm of Charles, that of thy courtesy thou pray those who inhabit Fano, that for me their adorations duly be put up, by which I may purge off my grievous sins. From thence I came. But the deep passages, whence issued out the blood wherein I dwelt, upon my bosom in Antenor's land were made, where to be more secure I thought. The author of the deed was Este's prince, who more than right could warrant, with his wrath pursued me. Had I towards Mira fled, when overta'en at Oriaco, still might I have breathed. But to the marsh I sped, and in the mire and rushes tangled there fell, and beheld my life-blood float the plain. Then said another, Ah, so may the wish that takes thee o'er the mountain be fulfilled, as thou shalt graciously give aid to mine. Of Montefeltro thirst, Buonconte worst, Giovanna nor none else have care for me, sorrowing with these I therefore go. I thus, from Campaldino's field what force or chance drew thee, that ne'er thy sepulture was known? Oh, answered he, at Casentino's foot, a stream there courseth, named Arciano, sprung in Apennine above the hermit's seat. E'en where its name is cancelled, there came I, pierced in the heart, fleeing away on foot, and bloodying the plain. Here sight and speech failed me, and finishing with Mary's name I fell, and tenantless my flesh remained. I will report the truth, which thou again tell to the living. Me God's angel took, whilst he of hell exclaimed, O thou from heaven, say wherefore hast thou robbed me? Thou of him the eternal portion bear'st with thee away for one poor tear that he deprives me of. But of the other rule I make. Thou knowest how in the atmosphere collects that vapour dank, returning into water, soon as it mounts where cold condenses it. That evil will, which in his intellect still follows evil, came and raised the wind and smoky mist, by virtue of the power given by his nature. Thence the valley, soon as day was spent, he covered o'er with cloud from Prato Magno to the mountain range, and stretched the sky above, so that the air impregnate changed to water. Fell the rain, and to the fosses came all that the land contained not, and as mighty as streams are wont, to the great river with such headlong sweep rushed, that naught stayed its course. My stiffened frame laid at his mouth the fell Archiano found, and dashed it into Arno, from my breast loosening the cross. That of myself I made when overcome with pain. He hurled me on, along the banks and bottom of his course, then in his muddy spoils encircling wrapped. Ah, when thou to the world shalt be returned, and rested after thy long road, so spake next the third spirit, then remember me. I once was Pia. Siena gave me life, Maremma took it from me. That he knows, who me with jeweled ring had first espoused. Canto 6. When from their game of dice men separate, he who hath lost remains in sadness fixed, revolving in his mind what luckless throws he cast. But meanwhile all the company go with the other. One before him runs, and one behind his mantle twitches. One fast by his side bids him remember him. He stops not, and each one to whom his hand is stretched well knows he bids him stand aside, and thus he from the press defends himself. E'en such was I in that close crowding throng, and turning so my face around to all, and promising, I scaped from it with pains. Here of Arezzo him I saw, who fell by Gino's cruel arm, and him beside, who in his chase was swallowed by the stream. Here Frederick Novello, with his hands stretched forth, entreated, and of Pisa he, who put the good Marzucco to such proof of constancy. Count Orso I beheld, and from its frame a soul dismissed for spite and envy, as it said, but for no crime. I speak of Peter de la Brosse, and here, while she yet lives, that lady of Brabant let her beware, lest for so false a deed she heard with worse than these. When I was freed from all those spirits who prayed for others' prayers to hasten on their state of blessedness, straight I began, O thou, my luminary, it seems expressly in thy text denied, that heaven's supreme decree can never bend to supplication. Yet with this design do these entreat. Can then their hope be vain, or is thy saying not to me revealed? He thus to me, both what I write is plain, and these deceived not in their hope, if well thy mind consider, that the sacred height of judgment doth not stoop, because love's flame in a short moment all fulfills, which he who sojourns here, in right should satisfy. Besides, when I this point concluded thus, by praying no defect could be supplied, because the prayer had none access to God. Yet in this deep suspicion rest thou not contented, unless she assure thee so, who betwixt truth and mind infuses light. I know not if thou take me right, I mean Beatrice. Her thou shalt behold above, upon this mountain's crown, fair seat of joy. Then I, Sir, let us mend our speed, for now I tire not as before, and lo, the hill stretches its shadow far. He answered thus, Our progress with this day shall be as much as we may now dispatch, but otherwise than thou supposest is the truth, for there thou canst not be, ere thou once more behold him back returning, who behind the steep is now so hidden, that as erst his beam thou dost not break. But lo, a spirit there stands solitary, and toward us looks. It will instruct us in the speediest way. We soon approached it. O thou Lombard spirit, how didst thou stand in high abstracted mood, scarce moving with slow dignity thine eyes? It spoke not aught, but let us onward pass, eyeing us as a lion on his watch. But Virgil with entreaty mild advanced, requesting it to show the best ascent. It answer to his question none returned, but of our country and our kind of life demanded. When my courteous guide began, Mantua, the solitary shadow quick rose towards us from the place in which it stood, and cried, Mantuan, I am thy countryman Sordello. Each the other then embraced. Ah, slavish Italy, thou inn of grief, vessel without a pilot in loud storm, lady no longer of fair provinces, but brothel house impure, this gentle spirit, even from the pleasant sound of his dear land, was prompt to greet a fellow citizen with such glad cheer, while now thy living ones in thee abide not without war, and one malicious gnaws another, I of those whom the same wall and the same moat contains, Seek, wretched one, around thy sea-coasts wide, then homeward to thy bosom turn, and mark if any part of the sweet peace enjoy. What boots it that thy reins Justinian's hand befitted, if thy saddle be unpressed? Naught doth he now but aggravate thy shame. Ah, people, thou obedient still shouldst live, and in the saddle let thy Caesar sit, if well thou markest that which God commands. Look how that beast to fellness hath relapsed, from having lost correction of the spur, since to the bridle thou hast set thine hand, O German Albert, who abandonst her, that is grown savage and unmanageable, when thou shouldst clasp her flanks with forked heels. Just judgment from the stars fall on thy blood, and be it strange and manifest to all, such as may strike thy successor with dread. For that thy sire and thou have suffered thus, through greediness of yonder realms detained, the garden of the empire to run waste. Come see the Capulets and Montagues, the Philippeschi and Monaldi, man who carst for naught, those sunk in grief, and these with dire suspicion racked. Come, cruel one, come and behold the oppression of the nobles, and mark their injuries, and thou mayest see what safety Santa Fiore can supply. Come and behold thy Rome, who calls on thee, desolate widow, day and night with moans. My Caesar, why dost thou desert my side? Come and behold what love among thy people, and if no pity touches thee for us, come and blush for thine own report. For me, if it be lawful, O almighty power, who wast in earth for our sakes crucified, are thy just eyes turned elsewhere? Or is this a preparation in the wondrous depth of thy sage counsel made, for some good end, entirely from our reach of thought cut off? So are the Italian cities all o'erthronged with tyrants, and a great Marcellus made of every petty factious villager. My Florence, thou mayest well remain unmoved at this digression, which affects not thee, thanks to thy people who so wisely speed. Many have justice in their heart, that long waiteth for counsel to direct the bow, or ere it dart unto its aim, but shine have it on their lips' edge. Many refuse to bear the common burdens. Readier thine answer unyield, and cry, Behold, I stoop. Make thyself glad, for thou hast reason now, thou wealthy. Thou at peace, thou wisdom fraught. Facts best witness if I speak the truth. Athens and Lacedaemon, who of old enacted laws for civil arts renowned, made little progress in improving life towards thee, who usest such nice subtlety, that to the middle of November scarce reaches the thread thou in October weav'st. How many times within thy memory customs and laws and coins and offices have been by thee renewed, and people changed. If thou rememberest well and canst see clear, thou wilt perceive thyself like a sick wretch, who finds no rest upon her down, but oft shifting her side, short respite seeks from pain. Canto 7. After their courteous greetings joyfully 7 times exchanged, Sordello backward drew, exclaiming, Who are ye? Before this mount by spirits worthy of ascent to God was sought, my bones had by Octavius's care been buried. I am Virgil, for no sin deprived of heaven except for lack of faith. So answered him in few my gentle guide, as one who aught before him suddenly beholding whence his wonder riseth, cries, It is yet is not, wavering in belief. Such he appeared. Then downward bent his eyes, and drawing near with reverential step caught him, where of mean estate might clasp his lord. Glory of Latium, he exclaimed, in whom our tongue its utmost power displayed. Boast of my honored birthplace. What desert of mine, what favor rather undeserved, shows thee to me? If I to hear that voice am worthy, say if from below thou comest, and from what cloisters pale. Through every orb of that sad region, he replied, Thus far am I arrived by heavenly influence led, and with such aid I come. There is a place there underneath, not made by torments sad, but by dun shades alone, where morning's voice sounds not of anguish sharp, but breathes in sighs. There I with little innocence abide, who by death's fangs were bitten, ere exempt from human taint. There I with those abide, who the 3 holy virtues put not on, but understood the rest, and without blame followed them all. But if thou knowest and canst, direct us, how we soonest may arrive, where purgatory its true beginning takes. He answered thus, We have no certain place assigned us. Upwards I may go or round, far as I can. I join thee for thy guide. But thou beholdest now how day declines, and upwards to proceed by night our power excels. Therefore it may be well to choose a place of pleasant sojourn. To the right some spirits sit apart retired. If thou consentest, I to these will lead thy steps, and thou wilt know them, not without delight. How chances this, was answered. Whoso wished to ascend by night, would he be thence debarred by other, or through his own weakness fail? The good Sordello then, along the ground trailing his finger, spoke. Only this line thou shalt not overpass, soon as the sun hath disappeared, not that aught else impedes thy going upwards, save the shades of night. These with the wont of power perplex the will. With them thou haply mightst return beneath, or to and fro around the mountain side wander, while day is in the horizon shut. My master straight, as wondering at his speech, exclaimed, Then lead us quickly where thou sayest, that while we stay we may enjoy delight. A little space we were removed from thence, when I perceived the mountain hollowed out, even as large valleys hollowed out on earth. That way, the escorting spirit cried, we go, where in a bosom the high bank recedes, and thou await renewal of the day. Betwixt the steep and plain a crooked path let us traverse into the ridge's side, where more than half the sloping edge expires. Refulgent gold and silver thrice refined, and scarlet grain and cerus, Indian wood, of lucid dye serene, fresh emeralds but newly broken by the herbs and flowers placed in that fair recess. In color all had been surpassed, as great surpasses less. Nor nature only there lavished her hues, but of the sweetness of 1,000 smells, a rare and undistinguished fragrance made. Salve Regina, on the grass and flowers, here chanting I beheld those spirits sit who not beyond the valley could be seen. Before the westering sun sink to his bed, began the Mantuan, who our steps had turned, mid those desires not that I lead ye on. For from this eminence ye shall discern better the acts and visages of all, than in the nether vale among them mixed. He who sits high above the rest, and seems to have neglected that he should have done, and to the other's song moves not his lip, the Emperor Rodolph call, who might have healed the wounds whereof fair Italy hath died, so that by others she revives but slowly, he who with kindly visage comforts him, swayed in that country, where the water springs, that Moldaw's river to the Elbe, and Elbe rolls to the ocean. Ottokar his name, who in his swaddling clothes was of more worth than Wenceslaus his son, a bearded man, pampered with rank luxuriousness and ease, and that one with the nose depress, who close in council seems with him of gentle look, flying expired, withering the lily's flower. Look there how he doth knock against his breast. The other ye behold, who for his cheek makes of one hand a couch, with frequent sighs. They are the father and the father-in-law of Gallia's bane. His vicious life they know and foul. Thence comes the grief that rends them thus. He so robust of limb who measure keeps in song, with him of feature prominent, with every virtue bore his girdle braced. And if that stripling who behind him sits, king after him had lived, his virtue then from vessel to like vessel had been poured, which may not of the other heirs be said. By James and Frederick his realms are held, neither the better heritage obtains. Rarely into the branches of the tree doth human worth mount up, and so ordains he who bestows it, that as his free gift it may be called. To Charles my words apply no less than to his brother in the song, which Puy and Provence now with grief confess. So much that plant degenerates from its seed, as more than Beatrice and Margaret Costanza still boasts of her valorous spouse. Behold the king of simple life and plain Harry of England, sitting there alone, he through his branches better issue spreads. That one who on the ground beneath the rest sits lowest, yet his gaze directs aloft, us William, that brave Marquis, for whose cause the deed of Alexandria and his war makes Conferat and Canaves weep. Canto 8. Now was the hour that wakens fond desire in men at sea, and melts their thoughtful heart, who in the morn have bid sweet friends farewell, and pilgrim newly on his road with love thrills, if he hear the vesper bell from far, that seems to mourn for the expiring day. When I, no longer taking heed to hear, began, with wonder from those spirits to mark one risen from its seat, which with its hand audience implored. Both palms it joined and raised, fixing its steadfast gaze towards the east, as telling God, I care for naught beside. Telusis ante, so devoutly then came from its lip, and in so soft a strain, that all my sense in ravishment was lost. And the rest after, softly and devout, followed through all the hymn with upward gaze directed to the bright supernal wheels. Hear, reader, for the truth makes thine eyes keen, for of so subtle texture is this veil, that thou with ease mayst pass it through unmarked. I saw that gentle band silently next look up, as if in expectation held, pale and in lowly guise, and from on high I saw forth issuing descend beneath two angels with two flame-illumined swords, broken and mutilated at their points. Green as the tender leaves but newly born, their vesture was, the which by wings as green beaten, they drew behind them, fanned in air. A little over us one took his stand, the other lighted on the opposing hill, so that the troop were in the midst contained. Well, I descried the whiteness on their heads, but in their visages the dazzled eye was lost, as faculty that by too much is overpowered. From Mary's bosom both are come, exclaimed Sordello, as a guard over the veil ganced him, who hither tends the serpent. Whence, not knowing by which path he came, I turned me round, and closely pressed, all frozen to my leader's trusted side. Sordello paused not. To the valley now, for it is time, let us descend, and hold converse with those great shadows, haply much their sight may please ye. Only 3 steps down methinks I measured, ere I was beneath, and noted one who looked as with desire to know me. Time was now that arrow dim, yet not so dim that twixt his eyes and mine it cleared not up what was concealed before. Mutually towards each other we advanced. Nino, thou courteous judge, what joy I felt, when I perceived thou wert not with the bad. No salutation kind on either part was left unsaid. He then inquired, how long since thou arrivedst at the mountain's foot, over the distant waves? Oh, answered I, through the sad seats of woe this morn I came, and still in my first life thus journeying on, the other strive to gain. Soon as they heard my words, he and Sordello backward drew, as suddenly amazed. To Virgil one, the other to a spirit turned, who near was seated, crying, Conrad, up with speed, come, see what of his grace high God hath willed. Then turning round to me, by that rare mark of honour which thou owest to him, who hides so deeply his first cause, it hath no ford, when thou shalt be beyond the vast of waves. Tell my Giovanna, that for me she call there, where reply to innocence is made. Her mother, I believe, loves me no more, since she has changed the white and wimpled folds, which she is doomed once more with grief to wish. By her it easily may be perceived, how long in women lasts the flame of love, if sight and touch do not relume it oft. For her so fair a burial will not make the viper which calls Milan to the field, as had been made by shrill Galura's bird. He spoke, and in his visage took the stamp of that right seal, which with due temperature glows in the bosom. My insatiate eyes meanwhile to heaven had travelled, even there where the bright stars are slowest, as a wheel nearest the axle, when my guide inquired, What there aloft, my son, has caught thy gaze? I answered, The 3 torches with which here the pole is all on fire. He then to me, The 4 resplendent stars thou saw'st this morn are there beneath, and these risen in their stead. While yet he spoke, Sordello to himself drew him, and cried, Lo there our enemy, and with his hand pointed that way to look. Along the side, where barrier none arose around the little vale, a serpent lay, such haply as gave Eve the bitter food. Between the grass and flowers the evil snake came on, reverting oft his lifted head, and as a beast that smooths its polished coat, licking his hack. I saw not, nor can tell, how those celestial falcons from their seat moved, but in motion each one well descried, hearing the air cut by their verdant plumes. The serpent fled, and to their stations back the angels up-returned with equal flight. The spirit, who to Nino, when he called, had come, from viewing me with fixed ken, through all that conflict loosened not his sight. So may the lamp which leads thee up on high find in thy destined lot of wax so much, as may suffice thee to the enamel's height. It thus began, If any certain news of Valdemagra and the neighbour part thou knowest, tell me, who once was mighty there. They called me Conrad Malaspina, not that old one, but from him I sprang. The love I bore my people is now here refined. In your dominions, I answered, ne'er was I. But through all Europe where do those men dwell, to whom their glory is not manifest? The fame that honors your illustrious house proclaims the nobles and proclaims the land, so that he knows it who was never there. I swear to you, so may my upward route prosper. Your honored nation not impairs the value of her coffer and her sword. Nature and use give her such privilege, that while the world is twisted from his course by a bad head, she only walks aright, and has the evil way in scorn. He then, now pass thee on. 7 times the tired sun revisits not the couch, which with 4 feet the forked Ares covers, ere that kind opinion shall be nailed into thy brain with stronger nails than others' speech can drive, if the sure course of judgment be not stayed. Canto 9. Now the fair consort of Tithonus old, arisen from her mate's beloved arms, looked palely o'er the eastern cliff, her brow, lucent with jewels, glittered, set in sign of that chill animal, who with his train smites fearful nations. And where then we were, 2 steps of her ascent the night had passed, and now the 3rd was closing up its wing, when I, who had so much of Adam with me, sank down upon the grass, o'ercome with sleep, there where all 5 were seated. In that hour, when near the dawn the swallow her sad lay, remembering haply ancient grief, renews, and with our minds more wanderers from the flesh, and less by thought restrained, are, as 'twere, full of holy divination in their dreams. Then in a vision did I seem to view a golden-feathered eagle in the sky, with open wings and hovering for descent, and I was in that place, methought, from whence young Ganymede, from his associates reft, was snatched aloft to the high consistory. Perhaps, thought I within me, here alone he strikes his quarry, and elsewhere disdains to pounce upon the prey. Therewith it seemed, a little wheeling in his airy tour, terrible as the lightning rushed he down, and snatched me upward even to the fire. There both, I thought, the eagle and myself did burn, and so intense the imagined flames, that needs my sleep was broken off. As erst Achilles shook himself, and round him rolled his wakened eyeballs, wondering where he was, when as his mother had from Chiron fled to Scyros, with him sleeping in her arms. E'en thus I shook me, soon as from my face the slumber parted, turning deadly pale, like one ice-struck with dread. Solo at my side my comfort stood, and the bright sun was now more than 2 hours aloft, and to the sea my looks were turned. "Fear not," my master cried, "assured we are at happy point. Thy strength shrink not, but rise dilated. Thou art come to Purgatory now. Lo, there the cliff that circling bounds it. Lo, the entrance there where it doth seem disparted. Ere the dawn ushered the daylight, when thy wearied soul slept in thee, o'er the flowery vale beneath a lady came, and thus bespake me, I am Lucia. Suffer me to take this man who slumbers. Easier so his way shall speed. Sordello and the other gentle shapes tarrying, she bare thee up, and as day shone this summit reached, and I pursued her steps. Here did she place thee. First her lovely eyes that open entrance showed me, then at once she vanished with thy sleep. Like one whose doubts are chased by certainty, and terror turned to comfort on discovery of the truth, such was the change in me, and as my guide beheld me fearless, up along the cliff he moved, and I behind him towards the height. Reader, thou markest how my theme doth rise, nor wonder therefore if more artfully I prop the structure. Nearer now we drew, arrived whence in that part, where first a breach as of a wall appeared, I could descry a portal, and 3 steps beneath that led for inlet there of different colour each, and one who watched but spake not yet a word. As more and more mine eye did stretch its view, I marked him seated on the highest step, in visage such as passed my power to bear. Grasped in his hand a naked sword, glanced back the rays so toward me, that I oft in vain my sight directed. "Speak from whence ye stand," he cried. "What would ye? Where is your escort? Take heed your coming upward, harm ye not." "A heavenly dame not skilless of these things," replied the instructor, "told us even now, pass that way, here the gate is." "And may she, befriending, prosper your ascent," resumed the courteous keeper of the gate. "Come then before our steps." We straightway thither came. The lowest stair was marble white, so smooth and polished, that therein my mirrored form distinct I saw. The next of hue more dark than sablest grain, a rough and singed block, cracked lengthwise and across. The third that lay massy above seemed porphyry, that flamed red as the life-blood spouting from a vein. On this God's angel either foot sustained, upon the threshold seated, which appeared a rock of diamond. Up the trinal steps my leader cheerily drew me. Ask, said he, with humble heart that he unbar the bolt. Piously at his holy feet devolved I cast me, praying him for pity's sake that he would open to me, but first fell thrice on my bosom prostrate. 7 times the letter that denotes the inward stain, he on my forehead with the blunted point of his drawn sword inscribed. And look, he cried, when entered, that thou wash these scars away. Ashes or earth ta'en dry out of the ground were of one color with the robe he wore. From underneath that vestment forth he drew 2 keys of metal twain. The one was gold, its fellow silver. With the pallid first, and next the burnished, he so plied the gate, as to content me well. Whenever one faileth of these, that in the keyhole straight it turn not to this alley, then expect access in vain. Such were the words he spake. One is more precious, but the other needs skill and sagacity, large share of each, ere its good task to disengage the knot be worthily performed. From Peter these I hold of him instructed, that I err rather in opening than in keeping fast, so but the suppliant at my feet implore. Then of that hallowed gate he thrust the door, exclaiming, Enter, but this warning hear, he forth again departs who looks behind. As in the hinges of that sacred ward the swivels turned, sonorous metal strong, harsh was the grating, nor so surlily roared the Tarpeian, when by force bereft of good Metellus, thenceforth from his loss to leanness doomed. Attentively I turned, listening the thunder that first issued forth, and we praise thee, O God, methought I heard in accents blended with sweet melody. The strains came o'er mine ear, e'en as the sound of choral voices, that in solemn chant with organ mingle, and now high and clear, come swelling, now float indistinct away. Canto 10. When we had passed the threshold of the gate, which the soul's ill affection doth disuse, making the crooked seem the straighter path, I heard its closing sound. Had mine eyes turned, for that offence what plea might have availed? We mounted up the riven rock, that wound on either side alternate as the wave flies and advances. Here some little art behooves us, said my leader, that our steps observe the varying flexure of the path. Thus we so slowly sped, that with cleft orb the moon once more o'erhangs her watery couch, ere we that straight have threaded. But when free we came and open, where the mount above one solid mass retires, I spent with toil, and both uncertain of the way we stood, upon a plain more lonesome than the roads that traverse desert wilds. From whence the brink borders upon vacuity to foot of the steep bank, that rises still, the space had measured thrice the stature of a man, and distant as mine eye could wing its flight, to leftward now and now to right dispatched, that cornice equal in extent appeared. Not yet our feet had on that summit moved, when I discovered that the bank around, whose proud uprising all ascent denied, was marble white, and so exactly wrought with quaintest sculpture, that not there alone had Polycletus, but e'en nature's self been shamed. The angel who came down to earth with tidings of the peace so many years wept for in vain, that oped the heavenly gates from their long interdict before us seemed, in a sweet act so sculptured to the life, he looked no silent image. One had sworn he had said, Hail, for she was imaged there, by whom the key did open to God's love, and in her act as sensibly impressed that word, Behold the handmaid of the Lord, as figure sealed on wax. Fix not thy mind on one place only, said the guide beloved, who had me near him on that part where lies the heart of man. My sight forthwith I turned, and marked, behind the Virgin Mother's form upon that side, where he that moved me stood, another story graven on the rock. I passed athwart the bard, and drew me near, that it might stand more aptly for my view. There in the selfsame marble were engraved the cart and kine, drawing the sacred ark, that from unbidden office awes mankind. Before it came much people, and the whole parted in 7 choirs. One sense cried, Nay, another, Yes, they sing. Like doubt arose betwixt the eye and smell, from the curled fume of incense breathing up the well-wrought toil. Preceding the blessed vessel, onward came with light dance leaping, girt in humble guise, sweet Israel's harper. In that hap he seemed less and yet more than kingly. Opposite, at a great palace from the lattice forth looked Michol, like a lady full of scorn and sorrow. To behold the tablet next, which at the hack of Michol whitely shone, I moved me. There was storied on the rock the exalted glory of the Roman prince, whose mighty worth moved Gregory to earn his mighty conquest, Trajan the emperor. A widow at his bridal stood, attired in tears and mourning. Round about them trooped full throng of knights, and overhead in gold the eagles floated, struggling with the wind. The wretch appeared amid all these to say, "Grant vengeance, sire, for woe beshrew this heart my son is murdered." He replying seemed, "Wait now till I return." And she, as one made hasty by her grief, "O sire, if thou dost not return, where I am, who then is, may right thee. What to thee is others' good, if thou neglect thy own? Now comfort thee." At length he answers, "It beseemeth well my duty be performed ere I move hence, so justice wills, and pity bids me stay." He whose ken nothing new surveys produced that visible speaking, new to us and strange, the like not found on earth. Fondly I gazed upon those patterns of meek humbleness, shapes yet more precious for their artist's sake, when lo, the poet whispered, "Where this way but slack their pace, a multitude advance. These to the lofty steps shall guide us on." Mine eyes, though bent on view of novel sights, their loved allurement, were not slow to turn. Reader, I would not that amazed thou miss of thy good purpose, hearing how just God decrees our debts be cancelled. Ponder not the form of suffering. Think on what succeeds. Think that at worst beyond the mighty doom it cannot pass. "Instructor," I began, "what I see hither tending bears no trace of human semblance, nor of aught beside that my foiled sight can guess." He answering thus, "So curbed to earth beneath their heavy teams of torment stoop they, that mine eye at first struggled as thine. But look intently thither, and disentangle with thy labouring view what underneath those stones approacheth. Now, e'en now mayst thou discern the pangs of each. Christians and proud, O poor and wretched ones, that feeble in the mind's eye lean your trust upon unstayed perverseness. Know ye not that we are worms, yet made at last to form the winged insect, imped with angel plumes that to heaven's justice unobstructed soars? Why buoy ye up aloft your unflagged souls? Abortive then and shapeless ye remain, like the untimely embryon of a worm. As to support incumbent floor or roof, for corbel is a figure sometimes seen, that crumples up its knees unto its breast, with the feigned posture stirring ruth unfeigned in the beholder's fancy. So I saw these fashioned, when I noted well their guise. Each, as his back was laden, came indeed, or more or less contract, but it appeared as he, who showed most patience in his look, wailing exclaimed, "I can endure no more." Canto 11. O thou Almighty Father, who dost make the heavens thy dwelling, not in bounds confined, but that with love intenser there thou viewest thy primal effluence, hallowed be thy name. Join each created being to extol thy might, for worthy humblest thanks and praise is thy blessed spirit. May thy kingdom's peace come unto us, for we, unless it come, with all our striving thither tend in vain. As of their will the angels unto thee tender meet sacrifice, circling thy throne with loud hosannas, so of theirs be done by saintly men on earth. Grant us this day our daily manna, without which he roams through this rough desert retrograde, who most toils to advance his steps. As we to each pardon the evil done us, pardon thou benign, and of our merit take no count. Gainst the old adversary prove thou not our virtue easily subdued, but free from his incitements and defeat his wiles. This last petition, dearest Lord, is made not for ourselves, since that were needless now, but for their sakes who after us remain. Thus for themselves and us good speed imploring, those spirits went beneath a weight like that we sometimes feel in dreams, all sore beset, but with unequal anguish wearied all, round the first circuit purging as they go, the world's gross darkness off. In our behalf, if their vows still be offered, what can here for them be vowed and done by such, whose wills have root of goodness in them? Well beseems that we should help them wash away the stains they carried hence, that so made pure and light, they may spring upward to the starry spheres. Ah, so may mercy-tempered justice rid your burdens speedily, that ye have power to stretch your wing, which e'en to your desire shall lift you, as ye show us on which hand toward the ladder leads the shortest way. And if there be more passages than one, instruct us of that easiest to ascend. For this man who comes with me and bears yet the charge of fleshly raiment, Adam left him, despite his better will, but slowly mounts. From whom the answer came unto these words, which my guide spake, appeared not, but 'twas said, Along the bank to rightward come with us, and ye shall find a pass that mocks not toil of living man to climb, and were it not that I am hindered by the rock, wherewith this arrogant neck is tamed, whence needs I stoop my visage to the ground, him who yet lives, whose name thou speakst not him I fain would view, to mark if e'er I knew him, and to crave his pity for the fardel that I bear. I was of Latian, of a Tuscan horn, a mighty one, Aldobranlesco's name, my sire's, I know not if ye e'er have heard. My old blood and forefathers' gallant deeds made me so haughty that I clean forgot the common mother, and to such excess waxed in my scorn of all men that I fell therefore, by what fate Siena's sons, each child in Campagnatico, can tell. I am Umberto. Not me only pride hath injured, but my kindred all involved in mischief with her. Here my lot ordains under this weight to groan, till I appease God's angry justice, since I did it not amongst the living, here amongst the dead. Listening I bent my visage down, and one, not he who spake, twisted beneath the weight that urged him, saw me, knew me straight, and called, holding his eyes with difficulty fixed intent upon me, stooping as I went, companion of their way. Oh, I exclaimed, art thou not Oderigi? Art not thou Agobio's glory, glory of that art which they of Paris call the limmer's skill? Brother, said he, with tints that gayer smile, Bolognian Franco's pencil lines the leaves. His all the honor now, mine borrowed light. In truth I had not been thus courteous to him, though whilst I lived, through eagerness of zeal for that preeminence my heart was bent on. Here of such pride the forfeiture is paid. Nor were I even here, if able still to sin, I had not turned me unto God. O powers of man, how vain your glory, nipped e'en in its height of verdure, if an age less bright succeed not. Cimabue thought, to lord it over painting's field, and now the cry is Giotto's, and his name eclipsed. Thus hath one Guido from the other snatched the lettered prize, and he perhaps is born, who shall drive either from their nest. The noise of worldly fame is but a blast of wind, that blows from divers points, and shifts its name, shifting the point it blows from. Shalt thou more live in the mouths of mankind, if thy flesh part shriveled from thee, than if thou hadst died, before the coral and the pap were left, or ere some 1,000 years have passed, and that is, to eternity compared, a space briefer than is the twinkling of an eye to the heaven's slowest orb. He there who treads so leisurely before me, far and wide through Tuscany resounded once, and now is in Siena scarce with whispers named. There was he sovereign when destruction caught the maddening rage of Florence, in that day proud as she now is loathsome. Your renown is as the herb, whose hue doth come and go, and his might withers it, by whom it sprang crude from the lap of earth. I thus to him, True are thy sayings, to my heart they breathe the kindly spirit of meekness, and allay what tumours rankle there. But who is he of whom thou spakest but now? This, he replied, is Provenzano. He is here because he reached, with grasp presumptuous, at the sway of all Siena. Thus he still hath gone, thus goeth never resting since he died. Such is the acquittance rendered back of him, who beyond measure darred on earth. I then, if soul that to the verge of life delays repentance, linger in that lower space, nor hither mount, unless good prayers befriend, how chanced admittance was vouchsafed to him. When at his glory's topmost height, said he, respect of dignity all cast aside, freely he fixed him on Siena's plain, a suitor to redeem his suffering friend, who languished in the prison house of Charles, nor for his sake refused through every vein to tremble. More I will not say, and dark I know my words are, but thy neighbours soon shall help thee to a comment on the text. This is the work that from these limits freed him. Canto 12. With equal pace as oxen in the yoke, I with that laden spirit journeyed on long as the mild instructor suffered me. But when he bade me quit him and proceed, for here, said he, behooves with sail and oars each man as best he may, push on his bark, Upright as one disposed for speed, I raised my body, still in thought submissive bowed. I now my leader's track not loath pursued, and each had shown how light we fared along, when thus he warned me, Bend thine eyesight down, for thou to ease the way shall find it good to ruminate the bed beneath thy feet. As in memorial of the buried drawn upon earth-level tombs, the sculptured form of what was once appears, at sight whereof tears often stream forth by remembrance waked, whose sacred stings the piteous only feel. So saw I there, but with more curious skill of portraiture o'erwrought, whate'er of space from forth the mountain stretches. On one part him I beheld, above all creatures erst created noblest, lightning fall from heaven. On the other side with bolt celestial pierced Briareus, cumbering earth he lay through dint of mortal ice-stroke. The Thimbrian god with Mars I saw, and Pallas round their sire armed still, and gazing on the giant's limbs strewn o'er the ethereal field. Nimrod I saw. At foot of the stupendous work he stood, as if bewildered, looking on the crowd leagued in his proud attempt on Sennaar's plain. O Niobe, in what a trance of woe thee I beheld upon that highway drawn, 7 sons on either side thee slain. O Saul, how ghastly didst thou look, on thine own sword expiring in Gilboa, from that hour ne'er visited with rain from heaven or dew. O fond Arachne, thee I also saw half spider now in anguish crawling up the unfinished web thou weav'dst to thy bane. O Rehoboam, here thy shape doth seem loring no more defiance, but fear smote with none to chase him in his chariot whirled, was shown beside upon the solid floor. How dear Alcmaeon forced his mother rate that ornament in evil hour received, how in the temple on Sennacherib fell his sons, and how a corpse they left him there, was shown the scath and cruel mangling made by Tomyris on Cyrus, when she cried, Blood thou didst thirst for, take thy fill of blood. Was shown how routed in the battle fled the Assyrians, Holofernes slain, and e'en the relics of the carnage. Troy I marked in ashes and in caverns. Oh, how fallen, how abject, Ilion, was thy semblance there! What master of the pencil or the style had traced the shades and lines that might have made the subtlest workman wonder? Dead, the living seemed alive. With clearer view his eye beheld not who beheld the truth, than mine what I did tread on, while I went low bending. Now swell out, and with stiff necks pass on, ye sons of Eve. Veil not your looks, lest they descry the evil of your path. I noted not, so busied was my thought, how much we now had circled of the mount, and of his course yet more the sun had spent, when he, who with still wakeful caution went, admonished, Raise thou up thy head, for no time is not now for slow suspense. Behold that way an angel hasting towards us. Lo, where duly the 6th handmaid doth return from service on the day. Wear thou in look and gesture seemly grace of reverent awe, that gladly he may forward us aloft. Consider that this day ne'er dawns again. Time's loss he had so often warned me 'gainst, I could not miss the scope at which he aimed. The goodly shape approached us, snowy white in vesture, and with visage casting streams of tremulous luster like the matin star. His arms he opened, then his wings, and spake, Onward, the steps, behold, are near, and now the ascent is without difficulty gained. A scanty few are they, who when they hear such tidings hasten. O ye race of men, though born to soar, why suffer ye a wind so slight to baffle ye? He led us on where the rock parted. Here against my front did beat his wings, then promised I should fare in safety on my way. As to ascend that steep, upon whose brow the chapel stands, or Rubaconte looking lordly down on the well-guided city, up the right, the impetuous rise is broken by the steps carved in that old and simple age, when still the registry and label rested safe. Thus is the acclivity relieved, which here precipitous from the other circuit falls. But on each hand the tall cliff presses close. As entering there we turned, voices in strain ineffable sang, Blessed are the poor in spirit. Ah, how far unlike to these the straits of hell. Here songs to usher us their shrieks of woe. We climb the holy stairs, and lighter to myself by far I seemed than on the plain before, whence thus I spake. Say, master, of what heavy thing have I been lightened, that scarce aught the sense of toil affects me journeying? He in few replied, When sin's broad characters, that yet remain upon thy temples, though well nigh effaced, shall be, as one is, all clean razed out. Then shall thy feet by heartiness of will be so o'ercome, they not alone shall feel no sense of labour, but delight much more shall wait them urged along their upward way. Then like to one upon whose head is placed somewhat he deems not of but from the becks of others as they pass him by. His hand lends therefore help to assure him, searches, finds, and well performs such office as the eye wants power to execute. So stretching forth the fingers of my right hand, did I find 6 only of the letters, which his sword who bare the keys had traced upon my brow. The leader, as he marked mine action, smiled. Canto 13. We reached the summit of the scale, and stood upon the second buttress of that mount which healeth him who climbs. A cornice there, like to the former, girdles round the hill, save that its arch with sweep less ample bends. Shadow nor image there is seen, all smooth the rampart and the path, reflecting naught but the rock's sullen hue. If here we wait for some to question, said the bard, I fear our choice may haply meet too long delay. Then fixedly upon the sun his eyes he fastened, made his right the central point from whence to move, and turned the left aside. O pleasant light, my confidence and hope, conduct us thou, he cried, on this new way, where now I venture, leading to the bourne we seek. The universal world to thee owes warmth and lustre. If no other cause forbid, thy beams should ever be our guide. Far as is measured for a mile on earth, in brief space had we journeyed, such prompt will impelled, and towards us flying now were heard spirits invisible, who courteously unto love's table bade the welcome guest. The voice that first flew by, called forth aloud, They have no wine. So on behind us passed, those sounds reiterating, nor yet lost in the faint distance, when another came crying, I am Orestes, and alike winged its fleet way. O Father, I exclaimed, what tongues are these? And as I questioned, lo, a third exclaiming, Love ye those have wronged you. This circuit, said my teacher, knots the scourge for envy, and the cords are therefore drawn by charity's correcting hand. The curb is of a harsher sound, as thou shalt hear, if I deem rightly, ere thou reach the pass, where pardon sets them free. But fix thine eyes intently through the air, and thou shalt see a multitude before thee seated, each along the shelving grot. Then more than erst I oped my eyes, before me viewed, and saw shadows with garments dark as was the rock. And when we passed a little forth, I heard a crying, Blessed Mary, pray for us, Michael and Peter, all ye saintly host. I do not think there walks on earth this day man so remorseless, that he hath not yearned with pity at the sight that next I saw. Mine eyes a load of sorrow teemed, when now I stood so near them, that their semblances came clearly to my view. Of sackcloth vile their covering seemed, and on his shoulder one did stay another, leaning, and all leaned against the cliff. E'en thus the blind and poor near the confessionals to crave an alms, stand each his head upon his fellows sunk, so most to stir compassion, not by sound of words alone, but that which moves not less, the sight of misery. And as never beam of noonday visiteth the eyeless man, e'en so was heaven a niggard unto these of his fair light. For through the orbs of all, a thread of wire impiercing knits them up, as for the taming of a haggard hawk. It were a wrong, methought, to pass and look on others, yet myself the while unseen. To my sage counsel therefore did I turn. He knew the meaning of the mute appeal, nor waited for my questioning, but said, Speak, and be brief, be subtle in thy words. On that part of the cornice, whence no rim engarlands its steep fall, did Virgil come. On the other side me were the spirits, their cheeks bathing devout with penitential tears, that through the dread impalement forced away. I turned me to them, and O shades, said I, assured that to your eyes unveiled shall shine the lofty light, sole object of your wish, so may heaven's grace clear whatsoe'er of foam floats turbid on the conscience, that thenceforth the stream of mind roll limpid from its source, as ye declare, for so shall ye impart a boon I dearly prize, if any soul of Latium dwell among ye, and perchance that soul may profit if I learn so much. My brother, we are each one citizens of one true city, any thou wouldst say who lived a stranger in Italia's land. So heard I answering as appealed, a voice that onward came some space from whence I stood, a spirit I noted in whose look was marked expectance. Ask ye how? The chin was raised as in one reft of sight. Spirit, said I, who for thy rise are tutoring, if thou be that which didst answer to me, or by place or name disclose thyself, that I may know thee. I was, it answered, of Siena. Here I cleanse away with these the evil life, soliciting with tears that he who is, vouchsafe him to us. Though Sapia named in sapience I excelled not, gladder far of others' hurt, than of the good befell me. That thou mayst own I now deceive thee not. Here if my folly were not as I speak it. When now my years sloped waning down the arch, it so bechanced my fellow citizens near Colli met their enemies in the field, and I prayed God to grant what he had willed. There were they vanquished, and betook themselves unto the bitter passages of flight. I marked the hunt, and waxing out of bounds in gladness, lifted up my shameless brow, and like the Merlin cheated by a gleam, cried, It is over. Heaven, I fear thee not. Upon my verge of life I wished for peace with God, nor repentance had supplied what I did lack of duty, were it not the hermit Piero, touched with charity, in his devout orisons thought on me. But who art thou that question'st of our state, who goest to my belief with lids unclosed, and breathest in thy talk? Mine eyes, said I, may yet be here ta'en from me, but not long, for they have not offended grievously with envious glances, but the woe beneath urges my soul with more exceeding dread. That nether load already weighs me down. She thus, Who then amongst us here aloft hath brought thee, if thou weenest to return? He, answered I, who standeth mute beside me. I live. Of me ask, therefore, chosen spirit, if thou desire I yonder yet should move for thee my mortal feet. Oh, she replied, this is so strange a thing. It is great sign that God doth love thee. Therefore with thy prayer sometime assist me. And by that I crave, which most thou covetest, that if thy feet e'er tread on Tuscan soil, thou save my fame amongst my kindred. Them shalt thou behold with that vain multitude, who set their hope on Telamone's haven, there to fail confounded. More shall when the fancied stream they sought of Dian called. But they who lead their navies, more than ruined hopes shall mourn. Canto 14. Say who is he around our mountain winds, or ever death has pruned his wing for flight, that opes his eyes and covers them at will. I know not who he is, but know thus much he comes not singly. Do thou ask of him, for thou art nearer to him, and take heed accost him gently, so that he may speak. Thus on the right 2 spirits bending each toward the other, talked of me, then both addressing me, their faces backward leaned, and thus the one began. O soul, who yet pent in the body tendest towards the sky, for charity we pray thee comfort us, recounting whence thou comest and who thou art, for thou dost make us at the favour shown thee marvel, as at a thing that ne'er hath been. There stretches through the midst of Tuscany, I straight began, a brooklet, whose wellhead springs up in Falterona, with his race not satisfied, when he some 100 miles hath measured. From his banks bring I this frame. To tell you who I am were words misspent, for yet my name scarce sounds on rumour's lip. If well I do incorporate with my thought the meaning of thy speech, said he who first addressed me, thou dost speak of Arno's wave, to whom the other, why hath he concealed the title of that river, as a man doth of some horrible thing? The spirit who thereof was questioned did acquit him thus. I know not, but 'tis fitting well the name should perish of that vale, for from the source where teems so plenteously the alpine steep maimed of Pelorus, that doth scarcely pass beyond that limit, even to the point whereunto ocean is restored, what heaven drains from the exhaustless store for all earth's streams, throughout the space is virtue worried down, as 'twere a snake by all for mortal foe, or through disastrous influence on the place, or else distortion of misguided wills, that custom goads to evil, whence in those, the dwellers in that miserable vale, nature is so transformed, it seems as they had shared of Circe's feeding. Midst brute swine, worthier of acorns than of other food created for man's use, he shapeth first his obscure way, then, sloping onward, finds curs, snarlers more in spite than power, from whom he turns with scorn aside, still journeying down, by how much more the cursed and luckless fosse swells out to largeness, e'en so much it finds dogs turning into wolves. Descending still through yet more hollow eddies, next he meets a race of foxes, so replete with craft, they do not fear that skill can master it. Nor will I cease because my words are heard by other ears than thine. It shall be well for this man if he keep in memory what from no erring spirit I reveal. Lo, I behold thy grandson that becomes a hunter of those wolves upon the shore of the fierce stream, and cows them all with dread. Their flesh yet living sets he up to sail, then like an aged beast to slaughter dooms. Many of life he reaves, himself of worth and goodly estimation. Smeared with gore, mark how he issues from the rueful wood, leaving such havoc that in 1,000 years it spreads not to prime lustihood again. As one who tidings hears of woe to come, changes his looks perturbed, from whate'er part the peril grasp him, so beheld I change that spirit, who had turned to listen, struck with sadness, soon as he had caught the word. His visage and the other's speech did raise desire in me to know the names of both, whereof with meek entreaty I inquired. The shade, who late addressed me, thus resumed, Thy wish imports that I vouchsafe to do for thy sake what thou wilt not do for mine. But since God's will is that so largely shine his grace in thee, I will be liberal too. Guido of Duca know then that I am. Envy so parched my blood, that had I seen a fellow man made joyous, thou hadst marked a livid paleness overspread my cheek. Such harvest reap I of the seed I sowed. O man, why place thy heart where there doth need exclusion of participants in good? This is Rinieri's spirit, this the boast and honour of the house of Calboli, whereof his worth no heritage remains. Nor his the only blood that hath been stripped, twixt Po, the mount, the Reno, and the shore, of all that truth or fancy asks for bliss. But in those limits such a growth has sprung of rank and venomed roots, as long would mock slow culture's toil. Where is good Lizio? Where Monardi, Traversalo, and Carpigna? O bastard slips of old Romagna's line! When in Bologna the low artisan, and in Faenza yon Bernardine sprouts, a gentle Chion from ignoble stem. Wonder not, Tuscan, if thou see me weep, when I recall to mind those once loved names, Guido of Prata, and of Azzo him that dwelt with you, Tignoso and his troop, with Traversaro's house and Anastagio's, each race disherited, and beside these the ladies and the knights, the toils and ease, that witched us into love and courtesy, where now such malice reigns in recreant hearts. O Brettinoro, wherefore tarriest still, since forth of thee thy family hath gone, and many, hating evil, joined their steps? Well doeth he that bids his lineage cease Bagnacavallo, Castracaro ill, and Conio worse, who care to propagate a race of counties from such blood as theirs. Well shall ye also do, Pagani, then when from amongst you tries your demon child. Not so, howe'er, that henceforth there remain true proof of what ye were. O Hugolin, thou sprung of Fantolini's line, thy name is safe, since none is looked for after thee to cloud its lustre, warping from thy stock. But Tuscan, go thy ways, for now I take far more delight in weeping than in words. Such pity for your sakes hath wrung my heart. We knew those gentle spirits at parting heard our steps. Their silence, therefore, of our way assured us. Soon as we had quitted them, advancing onward, lo, a voice that seemed like volleyed lightning, when it rives the air, met us and shouted, Whosoever finds will slay me, then fled from us, as the bolt lanced sudden from a downward rushing cloud. When it had given short truce unto our hearing, behold the other with a crash as loud as the quick-following thunder. Mark in me Aglauros turned to rock. I at the sound retreating drew more closely to my guide. Now in mute stillness rested all the air, and thus he spake. There was the galling bit. But your old enemy so baits his hook, he drags you eager to him. Hence nor curb avails you, nor reclaiming call. Heaven calls, and round about you wheeling courts your gaze with everlasting beauties. Yet your eye turns with fond doting still upon the earth. Therefore he smites you who discerneth all. Canto 15. As much as twixt the 3rd hour's close and dawn, appeareth of heaven's sphere, that ever whirls as restless as an infant in his play, so much appeared remaining to the sun of his slope journey towards the western goal. Evening was there, and here the noon of night, and full upon our foreheads smote the beams. For round the mountains circling so our path had led us, that toward the sunset now direct we journeyed, when I felt a weight of more exceeding splendor than before press on my front. The cause unknown, amaze possessed me, and both hands against my brow. Lifting, I interposed them as a screen, that of its gorgeous superflux of light clipped the diminished orb, as when the ray, striking on water or the surface clear of mirror, leaps unto the opposite part, ascending at a glance e'en as it fell, and so much differs from the stone that falls, through equal space as practised skill hath shown. Thus with refracted light before me seemed the ground there smitten, whence in sudden haste my sight recoiled. What is this, sire beloved, gainst which I strive to shield the sight in vain, cried I, and which towards us moving seems? Marvel not if the family of heaven, he answered, yet with dazzling radiance dim thy sense it is a messenger who comes, inviting man's ascent. Such sights ere long not grievous shall impart to thee delight, as thy perception is by nature wrought up to their pitch. The blessed angel, soon as we had reached him, hailed us with glad voice, Here enter on a ladder far less steep than ye have yet encountered. We forthwith ascending, heard behind us chanted sweet, Blessed the merciful, and happy thou that conquerest. Lonely each, my guide and I pursued our upward way, and as we went, some profit from his words I hoped to win, and thus of him inquiring framed my speech. What meant Romagna's spirit, when he spake of bliss exclusive with no partner shard? He straight replied, No wonder, since he knows what sorrow waits on his own worst defect, if he chide others, that they less may mourn. Because ye point your wishes at a mark, where by communion of possessors, part is lessened, envy bloweth up the size of men. No fear of that might touch ye, if the love of higher sphere exalted your desire. For there, by how much more they call it ours, so much propriety of each in good increases more, and heightened charity wraps that fair cloister in a brighter flame. Now lack I satisfaction more, said I, than if thou hadst been silent at the first, and doubt more gathers on my laboring thought. How can it chance that good distributed, the many that possess it, makes more rich, than if 'twere shared by few? He answering thus, Thy mind, reverting still to things of earth, strikes darkness from true light. The highest good unlimited, ineffable, doth so speed to love, as beam to lucid body darts, giving as much of ardor as it finds. The sempiternal effluence streams abroad, spreading wherever charity extends, so that the more aspirants to that bliss are multiplied, more good is there to love, and more is loved, as mirrors that reflect each unto other propagated light. If these my words avail not to allay thy thirsting, Beatrice thou shalt see, who of this want, and of all else thou hast, shall rid thee to the full. Provide but thou that from thy temples may be soon erased, e'en as the two already, those 5 scars, that when they pain thee worst, then kindliest heal. Thou, I had said, content'st me, when I saw the other round was gained, and wondering eyes did keep me mute. There suddenly I seemed by an ecstatic vision rapt away, and in a temple saw, methought, a crowd of many persons, and at the entrance stood a dame, whose sweet demeanour did express a mother's love, who said, Child, why hast thou dealt with us thus? Behold, thy sire and I, sorrowing, have sought thee, and so held her peace, and straight the vision fled. A female next appeared before me, down whose visage coursed those waters, that grief forces out from one by deep resentment stung, who seemed to say, If thou, Pisistratus, be lord indeed over this city named with such debate of adverse gods, and whence each science sparkles, avenge thee of those arms whose bold embrace hath clasped our daughter, and to fuel, meseemed, benign and meek, with visage undisturbed, her sovereign spake, How shall we those requite, who wish us evil, if we thus condemn the man that loves us? After that I saw a multitude in fury burning, slay with stones a stripling youth, and shout amain, Destroy, destroy. And him I saw, who bowed heavy with death unto the ground, yet made his eyes unfolded upward, gates to heaven, praying forgiveness of the Almighty Sire, amidst that cruel conflict on his foes, with looks that with compassion to their aim. Soon as my spirit, from her airy flight returning, sought again the things, whose truth depends not on her shaping, I observed how she had roved to no unreal scenes. Meanwhile the leader, who might see I moved, as one who struggles to shake off his sleep, exclaimed, What ails thee, that thou canst not hold thy footing firm, but more than half a league hast travelled with closed eyes and tottering gait, like to a man by wine or sleep o'ercharged? Beloved father, so thou deign, said I, to listen, I will tell thee what appeared before me, when so failed my sinking steps. He thus, Not if thy countenance were masked with 100 vizards, could a thought of thine how small soe'er elude me. What thou saw'st was shown, that freely thou mightst ope thy heart to the waters of peace, that flow diffused from their eternal fountain. I not asked what ails thee, for such cause as he doth, who looks only with that eye which sees no more, when spiritless the body lies, but asked, to give fresh vigour to thy foot. Such goads the slow and loitering need, that they be found not wanting, when their hour of watch returns. So on we journeyed through the evening sky, gazing intent, far onward, as our eyes with level view could stretch against the bright vespertine ray. And lo, by slow degrees gathering, a fog made towards us dark as night. There was no room for scaping, and that mist bereft us, both of sight and the pure air. Canto 16. Hell's dunnest gloom, or night unlustrous dark, of every plains reft and palled in clouds, did never spread before the sight a veil in thickness like that fog, nor to the sense so palpable and gross. Entering its shade, mine eye endured not with unclosed lids, which marking near me drew the faithful guide, offering me his shoulder for a stay. As the blind man behind his leader walks, lest he should err or stumble unawares on what might harm him, or perhaps destroy, I journeyed through that bitter air and foul, still listening to my escort's warning voice, "Look that from me thou part not." Straight I heard voices, and each one seemed to pray for peace, and for compassion to the Lamb of God that taketh sins away. Their prelude still was Agnus Dei, and through all the choir one voice, one measure ran, that perfect seemed the concord of their song. "Are these I hear spirits, O Master?" I exclaimed, and he, "Thou aim'st aright, these loose the bonds of wrath. Now who art thou that through our smoke dost cleave, and speak'st of us as thou thyself e'en yet dividest time by calends?" So one voice bespake me, whence my master said, "Reply, and ask if upward hence the passage lead. O being, who dost make thee pure to stand beautiful once more in thy Maker's sight, along with me, and thou shalt hear and wonder." Thus I, whereto the Spirit answering spake, "Long as 'tis lawful for me, shall my steps follow on thine, and since the cloudy smoke forbids the seeing, hearing in its stead shall keep us joined." I then forthwith began, "Yet in my mortal swathing I ascend to higher regions, and am hither come through the fearful agony of hell. And if so largely God hath doled his grace, that clean beside all modern precedent, he wills me to behold his kingly state, from me conceal not who thou wast, ere death had loosed thee, but instruct me, and instruct if rightly to the pass I tend, thy words the way directing as a safe escort." I was of Lombardy, and Marco called, not inexperienced of the world, that worth I still affected, from which all have turned the nerveless bow aside. Thy course tends right unto the summit. And replying thus, he added, "I beseech thee pray for me, when thou shalt come aloft." And I to him, "Accept my faith for pledge, I will perform what thou requirest. Yet one doubt remains, that wrings me sorely, if I solve it not, singly before it urged me, doubled now by thine opinion, when I couple that with one elsewhere declared, each strengthening other. The world indeed is even so forlorn of all good as thou speak'st it, and so swarms with every evil. Yet beseech thee, point the cause out to me that myself may see, and unto others show it, for in heaven one places it, and one on earth below." Then heaving forth a deep and audible sigh, "Brother," he thus began, "the world is blind, and thou in truth comest from it. Ye who live do so each cause refer to heaven above, e'en as its motion of necessity drew with it all that moves. If this were so, free choice in you were none, nor justice would there should be joy for virtue, woe for ill. Your movements have their primal bent from heaven, not all. Yet said I all, what then ensues? Light have ye still to follow evil or good, and of the will free power, which, if it stand firm and unwearied in heaven's first assay, conquers at last, so it be cherished well, triumphant over all. To mightier force, to better nature subject, ye abide free, not constrained by that, which forms in you the reasoning mind uninfluenced of the stars. If then the present race of mankind err, seek in yourselves the cause, and find it there. Herein thou shalt confess me no false spy. Forth from his plastic hand, who charmed beholds her image ere she yet exist, the soul comes like a babe, that wantons sportively weeping and laughing in its wayward moods, as artless and as ignorant of aught, save that her Maker being one who dwells with gladness ever, willingly she turns to whate'er yields her joy. Of some slight good the flavour soon she tastes, and snarred by that, with fondness she pursues it, if no guide recall, no rein direct her wandering course. Hence it behoved the law should be a curb, a sovereign hence behoved, whose piercing view might mark at least the fortress and main tower of the true city. Laws indeed there are, but who is he observes them? None, not he, who goes before the shepherd of the flock, who chews the cud but doth not cleave the hoof. Therefore the multitude, who see their guide strike at the very good they covet most, feed there and look no further. Thus the cause is not corrupted nature in yourselves, but ill conducting that hath turned the world to evil. Rome, that turned it unto good, was wont to boast 2 suns, whose several beams cast light on either way, the worlds and gods. One since hath quenched the other, and the sword is grafted on the crook, and so conjoined each must perforce decline to worse, unawed by fear of other. If thou doubt me, mark the blade, each herb is judged of by its seed. That land through which Addis and the Po their waters roll was once the residence of courtesy and velour, ere the day that frowned on Frederick. Now secure may pass those limits, whosoe'er hath left for shame, to talk with good men, or come near their haunts. 3 aged ones are still found there, in whom the old time chides the new. These deem it long ere God restore them to a better world. The good Gherardo, of Palazzo Hey Conrad, and Guido of Castello, named in Gallic phrase more fitly the plain Lombard. On this at last conclude, the Church of Rome, mixing 2 governments that ill assort, hath missed her footing, fallen into the mire, and there herself and burden much defiled. O Marco, I replied, shine arguments convince me, and the cause I now discern why of the heritage no portion came to Levi's offspring. But resolve me this who that Gherardo is, that as thou sayest is left a sample of the perished race, and for rebuke to this untoward age. Either thy words, said he, deceive, or else are meant to try me, that thou, speaking Tuscan, appearst not to have heard of good Gherardo, the sole addition that by which I know him, unless I borrowed from his daughter Gaia another name to grace him. God be with you. I bear you company no more. Behold the dawn with white ray glimmering through the mist. I must away. The angel comes, ere he appear. He said, and would not hear me more. Canto 17. Call to remembrance, reader, if thou e'er hast on a mountain top been ta'en by cloud, through which thou saw'st no better than the mole doth through opacous membrane. Then, whene'er the watery vapours dense began to melt into thin air, how faintly the sun's sphere seemed wading through them. So thy nimble thought may image, how at first I rebeheld the sun, that bedward now his couch o'erhung. Thus, with my leader's feet still equalling pace, from forth that cloud I came, when now expired the parting beams from off the nether shores. O quick and forgative power, that sometimes dost so rob us of ourselves, we take no mark though round about us 1,000 trumpets clang. What moves thee if the senses stir not? Light kindled in heaven, spontaneous, self-informed, or likelier gliding down with swift elapse by will divine. Portrayed before me came the traces of her dire impiety, whose form was changed into the bird, that most delights itself in song. And here my mind was inwardly so rapt, it gave no place to aught that asked admittance from without. Next showered into my fantasy a shape as of one crucified, whose visage spake fell rancor, malice deep, wherein he died, and round him Ahasuerus the great king, Esther his bride, and Mordecai the just, blameless in word and deed. As of itself that unsubstantial coinage of the brain burst like a bubble, which the water fails that fed it. In my vision straight up rose a damsel weeping loud, and cried, O queen, O mother, wherefore has intemperate ire driven thee to loathe thy being? Not to lose Lavinia, desperate thou hast slain thyself. Now hast thou lost me. I am she whose tears mourn ere I fall, a mother's timeless end. E'en as a sleep breaks off, if suddenly new radiance strike upon the closed lids, the broken slumber quivering ere it dies. Thus from before me sunk that imagery, vanishing, Soon as on my face there struck the light, outshining far our earthly beam. As round I turned me to survey what place I had arrived at, "Here ye mount," exclaimed a voice, that other purpose left me none, save will so eager to behold who spake I could not choose but gaze. As for the sun that weighs our vision down and veils his form in light transcendent, thus my virtue failed unequal. This is spirit from above, who marshals us our upward way, unsought, and in his own light shrouds him. As a man doth for himself, so now is done for us. For whoso waits imploring, yet sees need of his prompt aidance, sets himself prepared for blunt denial, ere the suit be made. Refuse we not to lend a ready foot at such inviting, haste we to ascend before it darken, for we may not then till morn again return. So spake my guide, and to one ladder both addressed our steps, and the first stair approaching, I perceived near me as 'twere the waving of a wing, that fanned my face and whispered, "Blessed they the peacemakers, they know not evil wrath." Now to such height above our heads were raised the last beams, followed close by hooded night, that many a star on all sides through the gloom shone out. Why partest from me, O my strength? So with myself I communed, for I felt my o'ertoiled sinews slacken. We had reached the summit, and were fixed like to a bark arrived at land. And waiting a short space, if aught should meet mine ear in that new round, then to my guide I turned and said, "Loved sire, declare what guilt is on this circle purged. If our feet rest, no need thy speech should pause." He thus to me, "The love of good, whate'er wanted of just proportion, here fulfills. Here plies afresh the oar that loitered ill. But that thou mayst yet clearlier understand, give ear unto my words, and thou shalt cull. Some fruit may please thee well from this delay. Creator nor created being, ne'er, my son," he thus began, "was without love, or natural, or the free spirit's growth. Thou hast not that to learn. The natural still is without error, but the other swerves, if on ill object bent, or through excess of vigor or defect. While ere it seeks the primal blessings, or with measure due the inferior, no delight that flows from it partakes of ill. But let it warp to evil, or with more ardor than behooves, or less. Pursue the good, the thing created then works 'gainst its maker. Hence thou must infer that love is german of each virtue in ye, and of each act no less that merits pain. Now since it may not be, but love intend the welfare mainly of the thing it loves, all from self-hatred are secure. And since no being can be thought to exist apart, and independent of the first, a bar of equal force restrains from hating that. Grant the distinction just, and it remains the evil must be another's, which is loved. 3 ways such love is gendered in your clay. There is who hopes, his neighbor's worth depressed, preeminence himself, and coverts hence for his own greatness that another fall. There is who so much fears the loss of power, fame, favor, glory, should his fellow mount above him, and so sickens at the thought, he loves their opposite. And there is he, whom wrong or insult seems to gall and shame, that he doth thirst for vengeance, and such needs must dote on others' evil. Here beneath this threefold love is mourned. Of the other sort be now instructed that which follows good, but with disordered and irregular course. All indistinctly apprehend a bliss on which the soul may rest, the hearts of all yearn after it, and to that wished born all therefore strive to tend. If ye behold or seek it with a love remiss and lax, this cornice after just repenting lays its penal torment on ye. Other good there is where man finds not his happiness. It is not true fruition, not that blessed essence of every good the branch and root. The love too lavishly bestowed on this, along 3 circles over us, is mourned. Account of that division tripartite expect not, fitter for thine own research. Canto 18. The teacher ended, and his high discourse concluding, earnest in my looks inquired if I appeared content, and I, whom still unsated thirst to hear him urged, was mute outwardly, yet inwardly I said, "Perchance my too much questioning offends." But he, true father, marked the secret wish by diffidence restrained, and speaking gave me boldness thus to speak. "Master, my sight gathers so lively virtue from thy beams, that all thy words convey distinct is seen. Wherefore I pray thee, Father, whom this heart holds dearest, thou wouldst deign by proof to unfold that love, from which as from their source thou bringst all good deeds and their opposite." He then, To what I now disclose be thy clear ken directed, and thou plainly shalt behold how much those blind have erred, who make themselves the guides of men. The soul, created apt to love, moves versatile which way soe'er aught pleasing prompts her, soon as she is waked by pleasure into act. Of substance true your apprehension forms its counterfeit, and in you the ideal shape presenting attracts the soul's regard. If she, thus drawn, incline toward it, love is that inclining, and a new nature knit by pleasure in ye. Then as the fire points up, and mounting seeks his birthplace and his lasting seat, e'en thus enters the captive soul into desire, which is a spiritual motion, that ne'er rests before enjoyment of the thing it loves. Enough to show thee how the truth from those is hidden, who aver all love a thing praiseworthy in itself, although perhaps its substance seem still good. Yet if the wax be good, it follows not the impression must. What love is, I returned, thy words, O guide, and my own docile mind reveal. Yet thence new doubts have sprung, for from without if love be offered to us, and the spirit knows no other footing, tend she right or wrong, is no desert of hers. He answering thus, what reason here discovers I have power to show thee, that which lies beyond, expect from Beatrice, faith not reason's task. Spirit, substantial form, with matter joined, not in confusion mixed, hath in itself specific virtue of that union born, which is not felt except it work, nor proved but through effect, as vegetable life by the green leaf. From whence his intellect deduced its primal notices of things, man therefore knows not, or his appetites, their first affections. Such in you as zeal in bees to gather honey, at the first volition, meriting nor blame nor praise. But o'er each lower faculty supreme, that as she list are summoned to her bar, ye have that virtue in you, whose just voice uttereth counsel, and whose word should keep the threshold of assent. Here is the source, whence cause of merit in you is derived, e'en as the affections good or ill she takes, or severs winnowed as the chaff. Those men who reasoning went to depth profoundest, marked that innate freedom, and were thence induced to leave their moral teaching to the world. Grant, then, that from necessity arise all love that glows within you. To dismiss or harbor it, the power is in yourselves. Remember Beatrice in her style denominates free choice by eminence the noble virtue, if in talk with thee she touch upon that theme. The moon, well nigh to midnight hour belated, made the stars appear to wink and fade, and her broad disk seemed like a crag on fire, as up the vault that course she journeyed, which the sun then warms, when they of Rome behold him at his set, betwixt Sardinia and the Corsic isle. And now the weight that hung upon my thought was lightened by the aid of that clear spirit, who raiseth Andes above Mantua's name. I therefore, when my questions had obtained solution plain and ample, stood as one musing in dreary slumber, but not long slumbered, for suddenly a multitude, the steep already turning from behind, rushed on. With fury and like random rout, as echoing on their shores at midnight heard Ismenus and Asopus for his Thebes, if Bacchus's help were needed, so came these tumultuous, curving each his rapid step, by eagerness impelled of holy love. Soon they o'ertook us. With such swiftness moved the mighty crowd. Two spirits at their head cried weeping. Blessed Mary sought with haste the hilly region. Caesar to subdue Ilerda, darted in Marseille his sting and flew to Spain. O tarry not, away. The others shouted. Let not time be lost through slackness of affection. Hearty zeal to serve reanimates celestial grace. O ye, in whom intenser fervency haply supplies, where lukewarm erst ye failed, slow or neglectful to absolve your part of good and virtuous, this man who yet lives, credit my tale though strange, desires to ascend, so morning rise to light us. Therefore say which hand leads nearest to the rifted rock. So spake my guide, to whom a shade returned. Come after us, and thou shalt find the cleft. We may not linger. Such resistless will speeds our unwearied course. Vouchsafe us, then, thy pardon, if our duty seem to thee discourteous rudeness. In Verona I was abbot of San Zeno, when the hand of Barbarossa grasped imperial sway, that name ne'er uttered without tears in Milan. And there is he hath one foot in his grave, who for that monastery ere long shall weep, rueing his power misused, for that his son, of body ill compact and worse in mind, and born in evil, he hath set in place of its true pastor. Whether more he spake or here was mute, I know not. He had sped e'en now so far beyond us. Yet thus much I heard, and in remembrance treasured it. He then, who never failed me at my need, cried, Hither turn, lo, too with sharp remorse, chiding their sin. In rear of all the troop these shouted, First they died, to whom the sea opened, or ever Jordan saw his heirs, and they who with Aeneas to the end endured not suffering, for their portion chose life without glory. Soon as they had fled past reach of sight, new thought within me rose by others followed fast, and each unlike its fellow, till led on from thought to thought, and pleasured with the fleeting train, mine eye was closed, and meditation changed to dream. Canto 19. It was the hour when of diurnal heat no reliques chafe the cold beams of the moon, or powered by earth, or planetary sway of Saturn, and the geomancer sees his greater fortune up the east ascend, where grey dawn checkers first the shadowy cone, when for me in my dream a woman's shape there came with lips that stammered, eyes aslant, distorted feet, hands maimed and colour pale. I looked upon her, and as sunshine cheers limbs numbed by nightly cold, e'en thus my look unloosed her tongue, next in brief space her form decrepit raised erect, and faded face with love's own hue illumed. Recovering speech, she forthwith warbling such a strain began, that I, how loath soe'er, could scarce have held attention from the song. I, thus she sang, I am the siren, she whom mariners on the wide sea are wildered when they hear, such fullness of delight the listener feels. I from his course Ulysses by my lay enchanted drew, whoe'er frequents me once parts seldom, so I charm him, and his heart contented knows no void. Or ere her mouth was closed, to shame her at her side appeared a dame of semblance holy. With stern voice she uttered, Say, O Virgil, who is this? Which hearing he approached with eyes still bent toward that goodly presence. The other seized her, and her robes tearing opened her before, and showed the belly to me, whence a smell exhaling loathsome waked me. Round I turned mine eyes, and thus the teacher, At the least 3 times my voice hath called thee, Rise, be gone, let us the opening find where thou mayest pass. I straightway rose. Now day poured down from high, filled all the circuits of the sacred mount, and as we journeyed on our shoulders smote the early ray. I followed, stooping low my forehead as a man, o'ercharged with thought, who bends him to the likeness of an arch, that midway spans the flood, when thus I heard, Come, enter here, in tone so soft and mild, as never met the ear on mortal strand. With swan-like wings dispread and pointing up, who thus had spoken marshalled us along, where each side of the solid masonry the sloping walls retired, then moved his plumes, and fanning us affirmed that those who mourn are blessed, for that comfort shall be theirs. What aileth thee that still thou look'st to earth? Began my leader, while the angelic shape a little over us his station took. New vision, I replied, hath raised in me surmising strange and anxious doubts, whereon my soul intent allows no other thought or room or entrance. Hast thou seen, said he, that old enchantress, her whose wiles alone the spirits o'er us weep for? Hast thou seen how man may free him of her bonds? Enough. Let thy heels spurn the earth, and thy raised ken fix on the lure, which heaven's eternal king whirls in the rolling spheres. As on his feet the falcon first looks down, then to the sky turns, and forth stretches eager for the food that woos him thither. So the call I heard, so onward, far as the dividing rock gave way, I journeyed, till the plain was reached. On the 5th circle when I stood at large, a race appeared before me, on the ground all downward lying prone and weeping sore. My soul hath cleaved to the dust. I heard with sighs so deep, they well-nigh choked the words. O ye elect of God, whose penal woes both hope and justice mitigate, direct towards the steep rising our uncertain way. If ye approach secure from this our doom prostration, and would urge your course with speed, see that ye still to rightward keep the brink. So them the bard besought, and such the words beyond us some short space in answer came. I noted what remained yet hidden from them. Thence to my liege's eyes mine eyes I bent, and he, forthwith interpreting their suit, beckoned his glad assent. Free then to act, as pleased me I drew near, and took my stand o'er that shade, whose words I late had marked. And Spirit, I said, in whom repentant tears mature that blessed hour, when thou with God shalt find acceptance, for a while suspend for me that mightier care. Say who thou wast, why thus ye grovel on your bellies prone, and if in aught ye wish my service there, whence living I am come. He answering spake, The cause why heaven our back toward his cope reverses shalt thou know, but me know first the successor of Peter, and the name and title of my lineage from that stream, that twixt Chiavari and Siestri draws his limpid waters through the lowly glen. A month and little more by proof I learnt, with what a weight that robe of sovereignty upon his shoulder rests, who from the mire would guard it, that each other fardel seems but feathers in the balance. Late, alas, was my conversion, but when I became Rome's pastor, I discerned at once the dream and cousinage of life, saw that the heart rested not there, and yet no prouder height lured on the climber, wherefore of that life no more enamoured in my bosom love of purer being kindled. For till then I was a soul in misery, alienate from God and covetous of all earthly things. Now, as thou seest, here punished for my doting. Such cleansing from the taint of avarice do spirits converted need. This mount inflicts no direr penalty, e'en as our eyes fastened below, nor ere to loftier clime were lifted. Thus hath justice levelled us here on the earth. As avarice quenched our love of good, without which is no working, thus here justice holds us prisoned, hand and foot chained down and bound, while heaven's just Lord shall please, so long to tarry motionless outstretched. My knees I stooped, and would have spoke, but he, ere my beginning, by his ear perceived I did him reverence. And what cause, said he, hath bowed thee thus? Compunction, I rejoined, and inward awe of your high dignity. Up, he exclaimed, brother, upon thy feet arise, ere not, thy fellow servant I, thine and all others, of one sovereign power. If thou hast ever marked those holy sounds of gospel truth, nor shall be given ill marriage, thou mayest discern the reasons of my speech. Go thy ways now, and linger here no more. Thy tarrying is a let unto the tears, with which I hasten that whereof thou spakest. I have on earth a kinswoman, her name Alagia, worthy in herself, so ill example of our house corrupt her not, and she is all remaineth of me there. Canto 20. Ill strives the will, 'gainst will more wise that strives his pleasure therefore to mine own preferred. I drew the sponge yet thirsty from the wave. Onward I moved. He also onward moved, who led me, coasting still, wherever place along the rock was vacant, as a man walks near the battlements on narrow wall. For those on the other part, who drop by drop wring out their all-infecting malady, too closely press the verge. Accursed be thou, inveterate wolf, whose gorge ingluts more prey than every beast beside, yet is not filled. So bottomless thy maw, ye spheres of heaven, to whom there are, as seems, who attribute all change in mortal state. When is the day of his appearing, for whom fate reserves to chase her hence? With wary steps and slow we passed, and I attentive to the shades, whom piteously I heard lament and wail, and midst the wailing one before us heard cry out, O blessed Virgin, as a dame in the sharp pangs of childbed, and how poor thou wast, it added. Witness that low roof where thou didst lay thy sacred burden down. O good Fabricius, thou didst virtue choose with poverty before great wealth with vice. The words so pleased me that desire to know the spirit, from whose lip they seemed to come, did draw me onward. Yet it spake the gift of Nicholas, which on the maidens he bounteous bestowed, to save their youthful prime unblemished. Spirit, who dost speak of deeds so worthy, tell me who thou was, I said, and why thou dost with single voice renew memorial of such praise. That boon vouchsafed haply shall meet reward, if I return to finish the short pilgrimage of life, still speeding to its close on restless wing. I, answered he, will tell thee not for hell, which thence I look for, but that in thyself grace so exceeding shines, before thy time of mortal dissolution. I was root of that ill plant, whose shade such poison sheds o'er all the Christian land, that seldom thence good fruit is gathered. Vengeance soon should come, had Ghent and Douay, Lille and Bruges power, and vengeance I of heaven's great judge implore. Hugh Capet was I high. From me descend the Philips and the Louis, of whom France newly is governed, born of one who plied the slaughterer's trade at Paris. When the race of ancient kings had vanished, all save one wrapped up in sable weeds, within my gripe I found the reins of empire, and such powers of new acquirement with full store of friends, that soon the widowed circlet of the crown was girt upon the temples of my son, he from whose bones the anointed race begins, till the great dower of Provence had removed the stains that yet obscured our lowly blood. Its sway indeed was narrow, but howe'er it wrought no evil. There with force and lies began its rapine. After for amends Poitou it seized, Navarre and Gascony. To Italy came Charles, and for amends young Conradin an innocent victim slew, and sent the angelic teacher back to heaven, still for amends. I see the time at hand, that forth from France invites another Charles to make himself and kindred better known. Unarmed he issues, saving with that lance, which the arch-traitor tilted with, and that he carries with so home a thrust, as rives the bowels of poor Florence. No increase of territory hence, but sin and shame shall be his guerdon, and so much the more as he more lightly deems of such foul wrong. I see the other, who a prisoner late had steps on shore, exposing to the mart his daughter whom he bargains for, as do the corsairs for their slaves. O avarice, what canst thou more, who hast subdued our blood so wholly to thyself, they feel no care of their own flesh? To hide with direr guilt past ill and future, lo, the flower de luce enters Alagna, in his vicar Christ himself a captive, and his mockery acted again. Lo, his holy lip, the vinegar and gall once more applied, and he twixt living robbers doomed to bleed. Lo, the new pilot, of whose cruelty such violence cannot fill the measure up, with no degree to sanction, pushes on into the temple his yet eager sails. O sovereign master, when shall I rejoice to see the vengeance which thy wrath well pleased in secret silence broods? While daylight lasts, so long what thou didst hear of her, sole spouse of the Great Spirit, and on which thou turnst to me for comment, is the general theme of all our prayers. But when it darkens, then a different strain we utter, then record Pygmalion, whom his gluttonous thirst of gold made traitor, robber, parricide, the woes of Midas, which his greedy wish ensued, marked for derision to all future times, and the fond Achan, how he stole the prey, that yet he seems by Joshua's ire pursued. Sapphira with her husband next we blame, and praise the forefeet, that with furious ramp spurned Heliodorus. All the mountain round rings with the infamy of Thracia's king, who slew his Phrygian charge, and last a shout ascends, Declare, O Crassus, for thou knowest the flavour of thy gold. The voice of each now high, now low, as each his impulse prompts, is led through many a pitch, acute or grave. Therefore not singly I erewhile rehearsed that blessedness we tell of in the day, but near me none beside his accent raised. From him we now had parted, and essayed with utmost efforts to surmount the way, when I did feel, as nodding to its fall, the mountain tremble, whence an icy chill seized on me, as on one to death conveyed. So shook not Delos, when Latona there couched to bring forth the twin-born eyes of heaven. Forthwith from every side a shout arose so vehement, that suddenly my guide drew near and cried, Doubt not while I conduct thee. Glory! All shouted, such the sounds mine ear gathered from those who near me swelled the sounds. Glory in the highest be to God. We stood immovably suspended, like to those, the shepherds, who first heard in Bethlehem's field that song, till ceased the trembling, and the song was ended. Then our hallowed path resumed, eyeing the prostrate shadows, who renewed their customed mourning. Never in my breast did ignorance so struggle with desire of knowledge, if my memory do not err, as in that moment. Nor through haste dared I to question, nor myself could aught discern. So on I fared in thoughtfulness and dread. Canto 21. The natural thirst, ne'er quenched but from the well, whereof the woman of Samaria craved, excited, haste along the cumbered path, after my guide impelled, and pity moved my bosom for the vengeful deed, though just. When lo, even as Luke relates that Christ appeared unto the two upon their way, new risen from his vaulted grave, to us a shade appeared, and after us approached, contemplating the crowd beneath its feet. We were not ware of it. So first it spake, saying, God give you peace, my brethren. Then sudden we turned, and Virgil such salute, as fitted that kind greeting, gave, and cried, Peace in the blessed council be thy lot awarded by that righteous court, which me to everlasting banishment exiles. How, he exclaimed, nor from his speed meanwhile desisting, if that ye be spirits, whom God vouchsafes not room above, who up the height has been thus far your guide. To whom the bard, If thou observe the tokens, which this man traced by the finger of the angel bears, 'tis plain that in the kingdom of the just he needs must share. But saithens she, whose wheel spins day and night, for him not yet had drawn that yarn, which on the fatal distaff piled, Clotho apportions to each wight that breathes. His soul, that sister is to mine and thine, not of herself could mount, for not like ours her ken, whence I from forth the ample gulf of hell was ta'en, to lead him, and will lead far as my lore avails. But if thou know, instruct us for what cause the mount erewhile thus shook and trembled, wherefore all at once seemed shouting even from his wave-washed foot. That questioning so tallied with my wish, the thirst did feel abatement of its edge e'en from expectance. He forthwith replied, in its devotion naught irregular this mount can witness, or by punctual rule unsanctioned, here from every change exempt. Other than that, which heaven in itself doth of itself receive, no influence can reach us. Tempest none, shower, hail, or snow, hoar frost or dewy moistness, higher falls than that brief scale of threefold steps. Thick clouds nor scudding rack are ever seen, swift glance ne'er lightens, nor Thomantian iris gleams, that yonder often shift on each side heaven. Vapor adust doth never mount above the highest of the trinal stairs, whereon Peter's vicegerent stands. Lower perchance, with various motion rocked, trembles the soil. But here, through wind in earth's deep hollow pent, I know not how, yet never trembled. Then trembles, when any spirit feels itself so purified, that it may rise or move for rising, and such loud acclaim ensues. Purification by the will alone is proved, that free to change society seizes the soul rejoicing in her will. Desire of bliss is present from the first, but strong propension hinders to that wish by the just ordinance of heaven opposed. Propension now is eager to fulfill the allotted torment as erewhile to sin. And I, who in this punishment had lain 500 years and more, but now have felt free wish for happier clime. Therefore thou felt'st the mountain tremble, and the spirits devout heardst, over all his limits, utter praise to that liege lord, whom I entreat their joy to hasten. Thus he spake, and since the draught is grateful ever as the thirst is keen, no words may speak my fullness of content. Now, said the instructor sage, I see the net that takes ye here, and how the toils are loosed, why rocks the mountain, and why ye rejoice. Vouchsafe that from thy lips I next may learn, who on the earth thou wast, and wherefore here so many an age wert prostrate. In that time when the good Titus, with heaven's king to help, avenged those piteous gashes, whence the blood by Judas' soul did issue, with the name most lasting and most honored there was I abundantly renowned, the shade replied, not yet with faith endued. So passing sweet my vocal spirit from Tolosa, Rome to herself drew me, where I merited a myrtle garland to enwreathe my brow. Statius they name me still. Of Thebes I sang, and next of great Achilles, but I the way fell with the second burthen. Of my flame those sparkles were the seeds, which I derived from the bright fountain of celestial fire that feeds unnumbered lamps. The song I mean which sounds Aeneas's wanderings, that the breast I hung at, that the nurse from whom my veins drank inspiration, whose authority was ever sacred with me. To have lived coeval with the Mantuan, I would bide the revolution of another sun beyond my stated years in banishment. The Mantuan, when he heard him, turned to me, and holding silence, by his countenance enjoined me silence, but the power which wills bears not supreme control. Laughter and tears follow so closely on the passion prompts them, they wait not for the motions of the will in nature's most sincere. I did but smile, as one who winks, and thereupon the shade broke off, and peered into mine eyes, where best our looks interpret. So to good event mayst thou conduct such great emprise, he cried. Say why across thy visage beamed but now the lightning of a smile. On either part, now am I straitened. One conjures me speak, the other to silence binds me, whence a sigh I utter, and the sigh is heard. Speak on, the teacher cried, and do not fear to speak, but tell him what so earnestly he asks. Whereon I thus, perchance, O ancient spirit, thou marvelst at my smiling. There is room for yet more wonder. He who guides my ken on high, he is that Mantuan, led by whom thou didst presume of men and gods to sing. If other cause thou deem'st for which I smiled, leave it as not the true one, and believe those words thou spakest of him indeed the cause. Now down he bent to embrace my teacher's feet, but he forbade him. Brother, do it not. Thou art a shadow, and behold'st a shade. He rising answered thus, Now hast thou proved the force and ardor of the love I bear thee, when I forget we are but things of air, and as a substance treat an empty shade. Canto 22. Now we had left the angel, who had turned to the sixth circle our ascending step, one gash from off my forehead raised, while they, whose wishes tend to justice, shouted forth blessed, and ended with I thirst, and I, more nimble than along the other straits, so journeyed that without the sense of toil I followed upward the swift-footed shades, when Virgil thus began, Let its pure flame from virtue flow, and love can never fail to warm another's bosom, so the light shine manifestly forth. Hence from that hour, when mongst us in the purlieus of the deep came down the spirit of Aquinum's hard, who told of thine affection, my good will hath been for thee of quality as strong as ever linked itself to one not seen. Therefore these stairs will now seem short to me. But tell me, and if too secure I loose the rein with a friend's license, as a friend forgive me, and speak now as with a friend, how chanced it covetous desire could find place in that bosom, midst such ample store of wisdom as thy zeal had treasured there? First somewhat moved to laughter by his words, Statius replied, Each syllable of thine is a dear pledge of love. Things oft appear that minister false matters to our doubts, when their true causes are removed from sight. Thy question doth assure me, thou believest I was on earth a covetous man, perhaps because thou foundest me in that circle placed. Know then I was too wide of avarice, and e'en for that excess, thousands of moons have waxed and waned upon my sufferings. And were it not that I with heedful care noted where thou exclaimest as if in ire with human nature, why thou cursed thirst of gold, dost not with juster measure guide the appetite of mortals? I had met the fierce encounter of the voluble rock. Then was I ware that with too ample wing the hands may haste to lavishment, and turned as from my other evil, so from this impenitence. How many from their grave shall with shorn locks arise, who living aye and at life's last extreme of this offence through ignorance did not repent, and know the fault which lies direct from any sin in level opposition, here with that wastes its green rankness on one common heap. Therefore if I have been with those who wail their avarice to cleanse me through reverse of their transgression, such hath been my lot. To whom the sovereign of the pastoral song, while thou didst sing that cruel warfare waged by the twin sorrow of Jocasta's womb, from thy discourse with Clio there it seems as faith had not been shine, without the which good deeds suffice not. And if so, what sun rose on thee, or what candle pierced the dark that thou didst after see to hoist the sail, and follow where the fisherman had led? He answering thus, By thee conducted first, I entered the Parnassian grots, and quaffed of the clear spring. Illumined first by thee, opened mine eyes to God. Thou didst as one who, journeying through the darkness, hears a light behind that profits not himself, but makes his followers wise, when thou exclaimedst, Lo, a renovated world, justice returned, times of primeval innocence restored, and a new race descended from above. Poet and Christian both to thee I owed. That thou mayest mark more clearly what I trace, my hand shall stretch forth to inform the lines with livelier coloring. Soon o'er all the world, by messengers from heaven, the true belief teemed now prolific, and that word of thine accordant to the new instructors chimed. Induced by which agreement, I was wont resort to them, and soon their sanctity so won upon me, that Domitian's rage pursuing them, I mixed my tears with theirs, and while on earth I stayed, still succored them, and their most righteous customs made me scorn all sects besides. Before I led the Greeks in tuneful fiction, to the streams of Thebes I was baptized, but secretly through fear remained a Christian, and conformed long time to pagan rites. 5 centuries and more, tea for that lukewarmness was fain to pace round the fourth circle. Thou then, who hast raised the covering which did hide such blessing from me, whilst much of this ascent is yet to climb, say if thou know where our old Terence bides, Cecilius, Plautus, Varro, if condemned they dwell, and in what province of the deep. These, said my guide, with Persius and myself, and others many more, are with that Greek, of mortals, the most cherished by the nine, in the first ward of darkness. There oft-times we of that mount hold converse, on whose top for aye our nurses live. We have the bard of Pella and the Teian, Agatho, Simonides, and many a Grecian else ingerlanded with laurel. Of thy train Antigone is there, Diphile, Argia, and as sorrowful as erst Ismene, and who showed Langia's wave, Deidamia with her sisters there, and blind Tiresias' daughter, and the bride sea-born of Peleus. Either poet now was silent, and no longer by the ascent or the steep walls obstructed, round them cast inquiring eyes. 4 handmaids of the day had finished now their office, and the 5th was at the chariot beam, directing still its balmy point aloof, when thus my guide: "Methinks it well behooves us to the brink bend the right shoulder, circuiting the mount, as we have ever used." So custom there was usher to the road, the which we chose less doubtful, as that worthy shade complied. They on before me went. I sole pursued, listening their speech, that to my thoughts conveyed mysterious lessons of sweet poesy. But soon they ceased, for midway of the road a tree we found, with goodly fruitage hung, and pleasant to the smell, and as a fir upward from bough to bough less ample spreads, so downward this less ample spread, that none, methinks aloft, may climb. Upon the side that closed our path, a liquid crystal fell from the steep rock, and through the sprays above streamed showering. With associate step the bards drew near the plant, and from amidst the leaves a voice was heard, "Ye shall be chary of me." And after added, "Mary took more thought for joy and honor of the nuptial feast, than for herself who answers now for you. The women of old Rome were satisfied with water for their beverage. Daniel fed on pulse, and wisdom gained. The primal age was beautiful as gold, and hunger then made acorns tasteful, thirst each rivulet run nectar. Honey and locusts were the food, whereon the Baptist in the wilderness fed, and that eminence of glory reached and greatness, which the evangelist records." Canto 23. On the green leaf mine eyes were fixed, like his who throws away his days in idle chase of the diminutive, when thus I heard the more than father warn me, "Son, our time asks thriftier using. Linger not, away." Thereat my face and steps at once I turned toward the sages, by whose converse cheered I journeyed on and felt no toil. And lo, a sound of weeping and a song, my lips, O Lord, and these so mingled it gave birth to pleasure and to pain. "O sire beloved, say what is this I hear?" Thus I inquired. "Spirits," said he, "who as they go, perchance, their debt of duty pay." As on their road the thoughtful pilgrims, overtaking some not known unto them, turn to them and look, but stay not. Thus, approaching from behind with speedier motion, eyed us as they passed, a crowd of spirits, silent and devout. The eyes of each were dark and hollow, pale their visage, and so lean withal, the bones stood staring through the skin. I do not think thus dry and meagre Erysichthon showed, when pinced by sharp-set famine to the quick. Lo, to myself I mused, the race who lost Jerusalem, when Mary with dire beak preyed on her child. The sockets seemed as rings, from which the gems were drops. Who reads the name of man upon his forehead? There the M had traced most plainly. Who would deem that scent of water and an apple could have proved powerful to generate such pining want, not knowing how it wrought? While now I stood wondering what thus could waste them, for the cause of their gaunt hollowness and scaly rind appeared not. Lo, a spirit turned his eyes in their deep-sunken cell, and fastened then on me, then cried with vehemence aloud, "What grace is this vouchsafed me?" By his looks I ne'er had recognized him, but the voice brought to my knowledge what his cheer concealed. Remembrance of his altered lineaments was kindled from that spark, and I agonized the visage of foresee. "Ah, respect this wan and leprous withered skin," thus he suppliant implored, "this macerated flesh. Speak to me truly of thyself, and who are those twain spirits that escort thee there, be it not said thou scornst to talk with me?" "That face of thine," I answered him, "which dead I once bewailed, disposes me not less for weeping, when I see it thus transformed. Say then, by heaven, what blasts ye thus? The whilst I wonder, ask not speech from me. Unapt is he to speak, whom other will employs." He thus, "The water and tea plant we passed, virtue possesses by the eternal will infused, the which so pines me. Every spirit whose song bewails his gluttony indulged too grossly, Here in hunger and in thirst is purified. The odor which the fruit and spray that showers upon the verdure breathe inflames us with desire to feed and drink. Nor once alone encompassing our route we come to add fresh fuel to the pain. Pain, said I, solace rather, for that will to the tree leads us by which Christ was led to call Elias, joyful when he paid our ransom from his vein. I answering thus, for see, from that day in which the world for better life thou changedst, not 5 years have circled. If the power of sinning more were first concluded in thee, ere thou knewest that kindly grief, which re-espouses us to God, how hither art thou come so soon? I thought to find thee lower there, where time is recompense for time. He straight replied, to drink up the sweet wormwood of affliction I have been brought thus early by the tears streamed down my Nella's cheeks. Her prayers devout, her sighs have drawn me from the coast, where oft expectance lingers, and have set me free from the other circles. In the sight of God so much the dearer is my widow prized, she whom I loved so fondly, as she ranks more singly eminent for virtuous deeds. The tract most barbarous of Sardinia's isle hath dames more chaste and modester by far than that wherein I left her. O sweet brother, what wouldst thou have me say? A time to come stands full within my view, to which this hour shall not be counted of an ancient date, when from the pulpit shall be loudly warned the unblushing dames of Florence, lest they bear unkerchiefed bosoms to the common gaze. What savage women hath the world e'er seen? What Saracens, for whom there needed scourge of spiritual or other discipline, to force them walk with covering on their limbs? But did they see, the shameless ones, that heaven wafts on swift wing toward them, while I speak? Their mouths were oped for howling. They shall taste of borrow, unless foresight cheat me here, or ere the cheek of him be clothed with down who is now rocked with lullaby asleep. Ah, now, my brother, hide thyself no more. Thou seest how not I alone, but all gaze, where thou veilst the intercepted sun. Whence I replied, if thou recall to mind what we were once together, even yet remembrance of those days may grieve thee sore. That I forsook that life was due to him who there precedes me, some few evenings past, when she was round who shines with sister lamp to his that glisters yonder, and I showed the sun. 'Tis he who through profoundest night of he true dead has brought me, with this flesh as true that follows. From that gloom the aid of his sure comfort drew me on to climb, and climbing wind along this mountain steep, which rectifies in you whate'er the world made crooked and depraved. I have his word, that he will bear me company as far as till I come where Beatrice dwells. But there must leave me. Virgil is that spirit who thus hath promised, and I pointed to him. The other is that shade, for whom so late your realm as he arose exulting shook through every pendant cliff and rocky bound. Canto 24. Our journey was not slackened by our talk, nor yet our talk by journeying. Still we spake, and urged our travels stoutly, like a ship when the wind sits astern. The shadowy forms, that seemed things dead and dead again, drew in at their deep-delved orbs rare wonder of me, perceiving I had life, and I my words continued, and thus spake. He journeys up perhaps more tardily than else he would, for others' sake. But tell me if thou knowest where is Picarda. Tell me if I see any of mark among this multitude who eye me thus. My sister, she for whom, twixt beautiful and good I cannot say which name was fitter, wears e'en now her crown, and triumphs in Olympus. Saying this, he added, since spare diet hath so worn our semblance out, 'tis lawful here to name each one. This, and his finger then he raised, is Buonaguna, he of Lucca, and that face beyond him, pierced unto a leaner fineness than the rest, had keeping of the church. He was of Tours, and purges by wan abstinence away Bolsena's eels and cups of muscadel. He showed me many others one by one, and all as they were named seemed well content, for no dark gesture I discerned in any. I saw through hunger Ubaldino grind his teeth on emptiness, and Boniface, that waved the crozier o'er a numerous flock. I saw the Marquis, who tad time erewhile to swill at Forli with less drought, yet so was one ne'er sated. I howe'er like him that gazing midst a crowd singles out one, so singled him of Lucca, for methought was none amongst them took such note of me. Somewhat I heard him whisper of Gentucca. The sound was indistinct, and murmured there, where justice that so strips them fixed her sting. Spirit, said I, It seems as thou wouldst fain speak with me. Let me hear thee. Mutual wish to converse prompts, which let us both indulge. He, answering, straight began, Woman is born, whose brow no wimple shades yet, that shall make my city please thee, blame it as they may. Go then with this forewarning. If aught false my whisper too implied, the event shall tell. But say, if of a truth I see the man of that new lay the inventor, which begins with ladies, ye that con the lore of love. To whom I thus, count of me but as one who am the scribe of love, that when he breathes, take up my pen, and as he dictates, write. Brother, said he, the hindrance which once held the notary with Giton and myself, short of that new and sweeter style I hear, is now disclosed. I see how ye your plume stretch, as the inditer guides them, which no question ours did not. He that seeks a grace beyond, sees not the distance parts one style from other. And as contented, here he held his peace. Like as the bird, that winter near the Nile, in squared regiment direct their course, then stretch themselves in file for speedier flight. Thus all the tribe of spirits as they turned their visage, faster deaf, nimble alike through leanness and desire. And as a man, tiered with the motion of a trotting steed, slacks pace and stays behind his company, till his o'er-breathed lungs keep temperate time, e'en so foresee let that holy crew proceed, behind them lingering at my side, and saying, When shall I again behold thee? How long my life may last, said I know not. This know, how soon soever I return, my wishes will before me have arrived. Scythence the place where I am set to live is day by day more scooped of all its good, and dismal ruin seems to threaten it. Go now, he cried. Lo, he whose guilt is most passes before my vision, dragged at heels of an infuriate beast. Toward the vale, where guilt hath no redemption, on it speeds, each step increasing swiftness on the last, until a blow it strikes that leaveth him a course most vilely shattered. No long space those wheels have yet to roll. Therewith his eyes looked up to heaven. Ere thou shalt plainly see that which my words may not more plainly tell, I quit thee. Time is precious here. I lose too much, thus measuring my pace with shine. As from a troop of well-ranked chivalry, one knight, more enterprising than the rest, pricks forth at gallop, eager to display his prowess in the first encounter proved, so parted he from us with lengthened strides, and left me on the way with those twain spirits, who were such mighty marshals of the world. When he beyond us had so fled mine eyes, no nearer reached him, than my thought his words. The branches of another fruit, thick hung, and blooming fresh appeared. E'en as our steps turned thither, not far off it rose to view. Beneath it were a multitude, that raised their hands, and shouted forth I know not what unto the boughs, like greedy and fond brats that beg, and answer none obtain from him, of whom they beg. But more to draw them on, he at arm's length the object of their wish above them holds aloft, and hides it not. At length, as undeceived, they went their way, and we approached the tree, who vows and tears sue to in vain, the mighty tree. Pass on, and come not near, stands higher up the wood, whereof Eve tasted, and from it was ta'en this plant. Such sounds from midst the thickets came, whence I, with either barred close to the side that rose, passed forth beyond. Remember, next we heard, those noblest creatures of the clouds, how they their twofold bosoms overgorged opposed in fight to Theseus. Call to mind the Hebrews, how effeminate they stooped to ease their thirst, whence Gideon's ranks were thinned, as he to Midian marched adown the hills. Thus near one border coasting still we heard the sins of gluttony, with woe erewhile regarded. Then along the lonely path, once more at large, full 1,000 paces on we travelled, each contemplative and mute. Why pensive journey thus ye three alone? Thus suddenly a voice exclaimed, whereat I shook as doth a scarred and paltry beast, then raised my head to look from whence it came. Was ne'er in furnace, glass, or metal seen so bright and glowing red, as was the shape I now beheld. If ye desire to mount, he cried, here must ye turn. This way he goes, who goes in quest of peace. His countenance had dazzled me, and to my guides I faced backward, like one who walks, as sound directs. As when to harbinger the dawn springs up on freshened wing the air of May, and breathes of fragrance, all imprenned with herb and flowers, E'en such a wind I felt upon my front blow gently, and the moving of a wing perceived, that moving shed ambrosial smell. And then a voice. Blessed are they whom grace doth so illume, that appetite in them exhaleth no inordinate desire, still hungering as the rule of temperance wills. Canto 25. It was an hour when he who climbs had need to walk uncrippled, for the sun had now to Taurus the meridian circle left, and to the Scorpion left the night. As one that makes no pause but presses on his road, whate'er betide him, if some urgent need impel. So entered we upon our way, one before other, for but singly none that steep and narrow scale admits to climb. E'en as the young stork lifteth up his wing through wish to fly, yet ventures not to quit the nest and drops it, so in me desire of questioning my guide arose and fell, arriving even to the act that marks a man prepared for speech. Him all our haste restrained not, but thus spake the sire beloved. Fear not to speed the shaft, that on thy lips stands trembling for its flight. Encouraged thus, I straight began. How there can leanness come, where is no want of nourishment to feed? If thou, he answered, hadst remembered thee, how meleager with the wasting brand wasted alike, by equal fires consumed, this would not trouble thee. And hadst thou thought, how in the mirror your reflected form with mimic motion vibrates, what now seems hard, had appeared no harder than the pulp of summer fruit mature. But that thy will in certainty may find its full repose, lo Statius here, on him I call and pray that he would now be healer of thy wound. If in thy presence I unfold to him the secrets of heaven's vengeance, let me plead thine own injunction to exculpate me. So Statius answered, and forthwith began, Attend my words, O son, and in thy mind receive them. So shall they be light to clear the doubt thou offerst. Blood concocted well, which by the thirsty veins is ne'er imbibed, and rests as food superfluous to be ta'en from the replenished table, in the heart derives effectual virtue, that informs the several human limbs, as being that which passes through the veins itself to make them. Yet more concocted it descends, where shame forbids to mention, and from thence distills in natural vessel on another's blood. Then each unite together, one disposed to endure to act the other, through meet frame of its recipient mold, that being reached it gins to work, coagulating first, then vivifies what its own substance caused to bear. With animation now endued, the active virtue, differing from a plant no further, than that this is on the way and at its limit that, continues yet to operate that now it moves and feels, as sea sponge clinging to the rock, and there assumes the organic powers its seed conveyed. This is the period, son, at which the virtue, that from the generating heart proceeds, is pliant and expansive, for each limb is in the heart by forgeful nature planned. How babe of animal becomes remains for thy considering, at this point more wise than thou hast erred, making the soul disjoined from passive intellect, because he saw no organ for the latter's use assigned. Open thy bosom to the truth that comes, no soon as in the embryo to the brain, articulation is complete. Then turns the primal mover with a smile of joy, on such great work of nature, and embreathes new spirit replete with virtue, that what here active it finds, to its own substance draws, and forms an individual soul that lives and feels and bends reflective on itself. And that thou less mayest marvel at the word, mark the sun's heat, how that to wine doth change, mixed with the moisture filtered through the vine. When Lachesis hath spun the thread, the soul takes with her both the human and divine, memory, intelligence, and will, in act far keener than before, the other powers inactive all and mute. No pause allowed, in wondrous sort self-moving to one strand of those, where the departed roam, she falls, here learns her destined path. Soon as the place receives her, round the plastic virtue beams, distinct as in the living limbs before, and as the air when saturate with showers, the casual beam refracting, decks itself with many a hue. So here the ambient air weareth that form, which influence of the soul imprints on it, and like the flame, that where the fire moves thither follows, so henceforth the new form on the spirit follows still. Hence hath it semblance, and is shadow called, with each sense even to the sight endued. Hence speech is ours, hence laughter, tears, and sighs, which thou mayest oft have witnessed on the mount. The obedient shadow fails not to present whatever varying passion moves within us, and this the cause of what thou marvelst at. Now the last flexure of our way we reached, and to the right hand turning other care awaits us. Here the rocky precipice hurls forth redundant flames, and from the rim a blast upblown, with forcible rebuff driveth them back, sequestered from its bound. Behooved us one by one along the side that bordered on the void to pass, and I feared on one hand the fire, on the other feared headlong to fall. When thus the instructor warned, strict rein must in this place direct the eyes, a little swerving and the way is lost. Then from the bosom of the burning mass, O God of mercy, heard I sung, and felt no less desire to turn. And when I saw spirits along the flame proceeding, I between their footsteps and mine own was fain to share by turns my view. At the hymn's close they shouted loud, I do not know a man. Then in low voice again took up the strain, which once more ended. To the wood they cried, ran Dian, and drave forth Callisto, stung with Cytherea's poison. Then returned unto their song. Then marry a pair extolled, who lived in virtue chastely, and the bands of wedded love. Nor from that task, I ween, surcease they, wheresoe'er the scorching fire enclasps them. Of such skill appliance needs to medicine the wound, that healeth last. Canto 26. While singly thus along the rim we walked, oft the good master warned me, Look thou well, avail it that I caution thee. The sun, now all the western clime irradiate changed from azure tinct to white, and as I passed, my passing shadow made the umbered flame burn ruddier. At so strange a sight I marked that many a spirit marveled on his way. This bred occasion first to speak of me. He seems, said they, no insubstantial frame. Then to obtain what certainty they might, stretched towards me, careful not to overpass the burning pale. O thou who followest the others, haply not more slow than they, but moved by reverence answer me who burn in thirst and fire. Nor I alone but these. All for thine answer do more thirst than doth Indian or Ethiop for the cooling stream. Tell us, how is it that thou makest thyself a wall against the sun, as thou not yet into the inextricable toils of death hadst entered? Thus spake one, and I had straight declared me, if attention had not turned to new appearance. Meeting these, there came midway the burning path, a crowd, on whom earnestly gazing, from each part I view the shadows all press forward, severally each snatch a hasty kiss, and then away. E'en so the emmets, mid their dusky troops, peer closely one at other, to spy out their mutual road perchance, and how they thrive. That friendly greeting parted, ere dispatch of the first onward step, from either tribe loud clamor rises. Those who newly come shout, Sodom and Gomorrah, these. The cow Pasiphae entered, that the beast she wooed might rush unto her luxury. Then as cranes, that part towards the Riphean mountains fly, part towards the Libyc sands, these to avoid the ice and those the sun, so hasteth off one crowd, advances the other, and resume their first song weeping, and their several shout. Again drew near my side the very same, who had erewhile besought me, and their looks marked eagerness to listen. I, who twice their will had noted, spake, O spirits secure, whene'er the time may be of peaceful end. My limbs, nor crude nor in mature old age, have I left yonder. Here they bear me, fed with blood and sinew strung, that I no more may live in blindness, hence I tend aloft. There is a dame on high, who wind for us this grace by which my mortal through your realm I bear, but may your utmost wish soon meet such full fruition, that the orb of heaven, fullest of love and of most ample space, receive you as ye tell, upon my page henceforth to stand recorded, who ye are, and what this multitude that at your backs have passed behind us. As one, mountain-bred, rugged and clownish, if some city's walls he chanced to enter, round him stares agape, confounded and struck dumb, e'en such appeared each spirit. But when rid of that amaze, not long the inmate of a noble heart, he who before had questioned, thus resumed, O blessed, who for death preparing takest experience of our limits in thy bark, their crime who not with us proceed was that, for which as he did triumph, Caesar heard the snout of Queen, to taunt him. Hence their cry of Sodom, as they parted, to rebuke themselves and aid the burning by their shame. Our sinning was Hermaphrodite, but we, because the law of humankind we broke, following like beasts our vile concupiscence, hence parting from them to our own disgrace record the name of her, by whom the beast in bestial tire was acted. Now our deeds thou knowest, and how we sinned. If thou by name wouldst haply know us, time permits not now to tell so much, nor can I. Of myself learn what thou wishest. Guinicelli one, who having truly sorrowed ere my last, already cleanse me. With such pious joy, as the two sons upon their mother gazed from sad Lycurgus rescued, such my joy, save that I more repressed it, when I heard from his own lips the name of him pronounced, who was a father to me, and to those my betters, who have ever used the sweet and pleasant rhymes of love. So naught I heard nor spake, but long time thoughtfully I went, gazing on him, and only for the fire approached not nearer. When my eyes were fed by looking on him with such solemn pledge, as force his credence, I devoted me unto his service wholly. In reply he thus bespake me, What from thee I hear is graved so deeply on my mind, the waves of Lethe shall not wash it off, nor make a whit less lively. But as now thy oath has sealed the truth, declare what cause impels that love, which both thy looks and speech bewray. Those dulcet lays, I answered, which as long as of our tongue the beauty does not fade, shall make us love the very ink that traced them. Brother, he cried, and pointed at a shade before him, there is one, whose mother speech doth owe to him a fairer ornament. He in love ditties and the tales of prose without a rival stands, and lets the fools talk on, who think the songster of Limoges o'ertops him. Rumor and the popular voice they look to more than truth, and so confirm opinion, ere by art or reason taught. Thus many of the elder time cried up Giton, giving him the prize, till truth by strength of numbers vanquished. If thou own so ample privilege, as to have gained free entrance to the cloister, whereof Christ is abbot of the college, say to him, one paternoster for me, far as needs for dwellers in this world, where power to sin no longer tempts us. Haply to make way, for one that followed next. When that was said, he vanished through the fire, as through the wave a fish, that glances diving to the deep. I, to the spirit he had shown me, drew a little onward, and besought his name, for which my heart, I said, kept gracious room. He frankly thus began, Thy courtesy so wins on me, I have nor power nor will to hide me. I am Arnaud, and with songs, sorely lamenting for my folly past, thorough this ford of fire I wade, and see the day I hope for, smiling in my view. I pray ye by the worth that guides ye up unto the summit of the scale, in time remember ye my sufferings. With such words he disappeared in the refining flame. Canto 27. Now was the sun so stationed, as when first his early radiance quivers on the heights, where streamed his maker's blood, while Libra hangs above Hesperian Ebro, and new fires meridian flash on Ganges' yellow tide. So day was sinking, when the angel of God appeared before us. Joy was in his mien. Forth of the flame he stood upon the brink, and with a voice whose lively clearness far surpassed our human, Blessed are the pure in heart, he sang. Then near him as we came, Go ye not further, holy spirits, he cried, ere the fire pierce you, enter in, and list attentive to the song ye hear from thence. I, when I heard his saying, was as one laid in the grave. My hands together clasped, and upward stretching on the fire I looked, and busy fancy conjured up the forms, erewhile beheld alive, consumed in flames. The escorting spirits turned with gentle looks toward me, and the Mantuan spake, My son, here torment thou mayest feel, but canst not death. Remember thee, if I safe e'en on Geryon brought thee, now I come more near to God, wilt thou not trust me now? Of this be sure, though in its womb that flame 1,000 years contained thee, from thy head no hair should perish. If thou doubt my truth, approach, and with thy hands thy vesture's hem stretch forth, and for thyself confirm belief. Lay now all fear, lay all fear aside, turn hither and come onward undismayed. I still, though conscience urged, no step advanced. When still he saw me fixed and obstinate, somewhat disturbed, he cried, Mark now, my son, from Beatrice thou art by this wall divided. As at Thisbe's name the eye of Pyramus was opened, when life ebbed fast from his veins, and took one parting glance, while Vermeil dyed the mulberry. Thus I turned to my sage guide, relenting when I heard the name that springs forever in my breast. He shook his forehead. "And how long," he said, "linger we now?" Then smiled, as one would smile upon a child that eyes the fruit and yields. Into the fire before me then he walked, and Statius, who erewhile no little space had parted us, he prayed to come behind. I would have cast me into molten glass to cool me when I entered, so intense ragged the conflagrant mass. The sire beloved, to comfort me as he proceeded, still of Beatrice talked. "Her eyes," saith he, "e'en now I seem to view." From the other side a voice that sang did guide us, and the voice following with heedful ear we issued forth, there where the path led upward. "Come," we heard, "come, blessed of my father." Such the sounds that hailed us from within a light, which shone so radiant I could not endure the view. "The sun," it added, "hastes, and evening comes. Delay not, ere the western sky is hung with blackness, strive ye for the pass." Our way upright within the rock arose, and faced such part of heaven, that from before my steps the beams were shrouded of the sinking sun. Nor many stairs were overpass, when now by fading of the shadow we perceived the sun behind us couched, and ere one face of darkness o'er its measureless expanse involved the horizon, and the night her lot held individual, each of us had made a stair his pallet. Not that will, but power, had failed us by the nature of that mount forbidden further travel. As the goats, that late have skipped and wantoned rapidly upon the craggy cliffs, ere they had ta'en their supper on the herb, now silent lie and ruminate beneath the umbrage brown, while noonday rages, and the goatherd leans upon his staff, and leaning watches them, and as the swain that lodges out all night in quiet by his flock, lest beast of prey disperse them, even so all three abode, I as a goat and as the shepherds they, close pent on either side by shelving rock. A little glimpse of sky was seen above, yet by that little I beheld the stars in magnitude and rustle shining forth with more than wonted glory. As I lay gazing on them, and in that fit of musing sleep overcame me, sleep that bringeth oft tidings of future hap. About the hour, as I believe, when Venus from the east first lightened on the mountain, she whose orb seems always glowing with the fire of love, a lady young and beautiful, I dreamed, was passing o'er a lea, and as she came, methought I saw her ever and anon bending to cull the flowers, and thus she sang, "Know ye, whoever of my name would ask, that I am Leah. For my brow to weave a garland, these fair hands unwearied ply. To please me at the crystal mirror here I deck me. But my sister Rachel, she before her glass abides the livelong day, her radiant eyes beholding charmed no less than I with this delightful task, her joy in contemplation as in labor mine. And now as glimmering dawn appeared, that breaks more welcome to the pilgrim still, as he sojourns less distant on his homeward way, darkness from all sides fled, and with it fled my slumber, whence I rose and saw my guide already risen. That delicious fruit, which through so many a branch the zealous care of mortals roams in quest of, shall this day appease thy hunger. Such the words I heard from Virgil's lip, and never greeting heard so pleasant as the sounds. Within me straight desire so grew upon desire to mount, thenceforward at each step I felt the wings increasing for my flight. When we had run o'er all the ladder to its topmost round, as there we stood, on me the Mantuan fixed his eyes, and thus he spake. Both fires, my son, the temporal and eternal thou hast seen, and art arrived, where of itself my ken no further reaches. I with skill and art thus far have drawn thee. Now thy pleasure take for guide. Thou hast o'ercome the steeper way, o'ercome the straighter. Lo, the sun that darts his beam upon thy forehead. Lo, the herb, the arboreta and flowers, which of itself this land pours forth profuse. Till those bright eyes with gladness come, which weeping made me haste to succor thee, thou mayest or seat thee down, or wander where thou wilt. Expect no more sanction of warning voice or sign from me, free of thy own arbitrament to choose, discreet, judicious. To distrust thy sense were henceforth error. I invest thee then with crown and mitre, sovereign o'er thyself. Canto 28. Through that celestial forest whose thick shade with lively greenness the new springing day attempered, eager now to roam and search its limits round, forthwith I left the bank, along the champaign leisurely my way, pursuing o'er the ground that on all sides delicious odour breathed, a pleasant air, that intermitted never veered, smote on my temples gently as a wind of softest influence, at which the sprays, obedient all, leaned trembling to that part, where first the holy mountain casts his shade, yet were not so disordered, but that still upon their top the feathered quiristers applied their wonted art, and with full joy welcomed those hours of prime, and warbled shrill amid the leaves, that to their jocund lays inept tenor, even as from branch to branch, along the piney forests on the shore of Chiasse, rolls the gathering melody, when Aeolus hath from his cavern loosed the dripping south. Already had my steps, though slow, so far into that ancient wood transported me, I could not ken the place where I had entered, when behold, my path was bounded by a rill, which to the left with little rippling waters bent the grass that issued from its brink. On earth no wave how clean soe'er that would not seem to have some mixture in itself, compared with this, transpicuous clear, yet darkly on it rolled, darkly beneath perpetual gloom, which ne'er admits or sun or moonlight there to shine. My feet advanced not, but my wondering eyes passed onward o'er the streamlet, to survey the tender May bloom, flushed through many a hue, in prodigal variety, and there, as object rising suddenly to view, that from our bosom every thought beside with the rare marvel chases, I beheld a lady all alone, who singing went, and culling flower from flower, wherewith her way was all o'erpainted. Lady beautiful, thou who, if looks that used to speak the heart are worthy of our trust, with love's own beam dost warm thee, thus to her my speech I framed. Ah, please thee hither towards the streamlet bend thy steps so near, that I may list thy song. Beholding thee in this fair place, methinks, I call to mind where wandered and how looked Proserpine, in that season, when her child the mother lost, and she the bloomy spring. As when a lady, turning in the dance, doth foot it featly, and advances scarce one step before the other to the ground. Over the yellow and vermilion flowers thus turned she at my suit, most maiden-like, veiling her sober eyes, and came so near, that I distinctly caught the dulcet sound. Arriving where the limped waters now laved the green sward, her eyes she deigned to raise, that shot such splendor on me, as I ween ne'er glanced from Cytherea's, when her son had sped his keenest weapon to her heart. Upon the opposite bank she stood and smiled, through her graceful fingers shifted still the intermingling dyes, which without seed that lofty land unbosoms. By the stream 3 paces only were we sundered, yet the Hellespont, where Xerxes passed it o'er, a curb forever to the pride of man, was by Leander not more hateful held for floating with inhospitable wave twixt Sestus and Abydos, than by me that flood, because it gave no passage thence. Strangers ye come, and haply in this place, that cradled human nature in its birth, wondering ye not without suspicion view my smiles, but that sweet strain of psalmody, thou, Lord, hast made me glad, will give ye light, which may uncloud your minds. And thou who standst the foremost, and didst make thy suit to me, say if aught else thou wish to hear, for I came prompt to answer every doubt of thine. She spake, and I replied, I know not how to reconcile this wave and rustling sound of forest leaves with what I late have heard of opposite report. She answering thus, I will unfold the cause whence that proceeds, which makes thee wonder, and so purge the cloud that hath enwraps thee. The first good, whose joy is only in himself, created man for happiness, and gave this goodly place, his pledge and earnest of eternal peace. Favored thus highly through his own defect he fell, and here made short sojourn. He fell, and for the bitterness of sorrow, changed laughter unblamed and ever new delight, that vapours none, exhaled from earth beneath, or from the waters which wherever heat attracts them follow, might ascend thus far to vex man's peaceful state. This mountain rose so high toward the heaven, nor fears the rage of elements contending, from that part exempted where the gate his limit bars, because the circumambient air throughout with its first impulse circles still, unless aught interpose to cheek or thwart its course. Upon the summit, which on every side to visitation of the impassive air is open, doth that motion strike, and makes beneath its sway the umbrageous wood resound, and in the shaken plant such power resides, that it impregnates with its efficacy the voyaging breeze, upon whose subtle plume that wafted flies abroad, and the other land receiving as 'tis worthy in itself, or in the clime that warms it, doth conceive, and from its womb produces many a tree of various virtue. This when thou hast heard, the marvel ceases, if in yonder earth some plant without apparent seed be found to fix its fibrous stem. And further learn, that with prolific foison of all seeds, this holy plain is filled, and in itself bears fruit that ne'er was plucked on other soil. The water, thou beholdst, springs not from vein, as stream that intermittently repairs and spends his pulse of life, but issues forth from fountain, solid, undecaying, sure, and by the will omnific, full supply feeds whatsoe'er on either side it pours. On this devolved with power to take away remembrance of offense, on that to bring remembrance back of every good deed done. From whence its name of Lethe on this part, on the other you know, both of which must first be tasted ere it work, the last exceeding all flavors else. Albeit thy thirst may now be well contented, if I here break off, no more revealing, yet a corollary I freely give beside, nor deem my words less grateful to thee, if they somewhat pass the stretch of promise. They whose verse of yore the golden age recorded and its bliss, on the Parnassian mountain of this place perhaps had dreamed. Here was man guiltless, here perpetual spring and every fruit, and this the far-famed nectar. Turning to the bards, when she had ceased, I noted in their looks a smile at her conclusion. Then my face again directed to the lovely dame. Canto 29. Singing as if enamored, she resumed and closed the song with "Blessed they whose sins are covered." Like the wood nymphs, then, that tripped singly across the sylvan shadows, one eager to view and one to scape the sun, so moved she on against the current up the verdant rivage. I, her mincing step observing, with as tardy step pursued. Between us, not 100 paces trod, the bank on each side bending equally, gave me to face the orient. Nor our way far onward brought us, when to me at once she turned and cried, "My brother, look and hearken." And lo, a sudden lustre ran across through the great forest on all parts, so bright I doubted whether lightning were abroad, but that expiring ever in the spleen, that doth unfold it, and this during still and waxing still in splendor, made me question what it might be, and a sweet melody ran through the luminous air. Then did I chide with warrantable zeal the hardihood of our first parent, for that there were earth stood in obedience to the heavens, she only woman, the creature of an hour, endured not restraint of any veil, which had she borne devoutly, joys ineffable as these had from the first and long time since been mine. While through that wilderness of primy sweets that never fade, suspense I walked, and yet expectant of beatitude more high before us like a blazing fire, the air under the green boughs glowed, and for a song distinct the sound of melody was heard. O ye thrice holy virgins, for your sakes if e'er I suffered hunger, cold, and watching, occasion calls on me to crave your bounty. Now through my breast let Helicon his stream pour copious, and Urania with her choir arise to aid me, while the verse unfolds things that do almost mock the grasp of thought. Onward a space what seemed 7 trees of gold, the intervening distance to mine eye falsely presented. But when I was come so near them, that no lineament was lost of those, with which a doubtful object seen remotely plays on the misdeeming sense, then did the faculty that ministers discourse to reason these for tapers of gold distinguish, and it the singing trace the sound Hosanna. Above, their beauteous garniture flamed with more ample lustre than the moon through cloudless sky at midnight in her full. I turned me full of wonder to my guide, and he did answer with a countenance charged with no less amazement, whence my view reverted to those lofty things, which came so slowly moving towards us, that the bride would have outstripped them on her bridal day. The lady called aloud, "Why thus yet burns affection in thee for these living lights, and dost not look on that which follows them?" I straightway marked a tribe behind them walk, as if attendant on their leaders, clothed with raiment of such whiteness, as on earth was never. On my left, the watery gleam borrowed, and gave me back, when there I looked, as in a mirror, my left side portrayed. When I had chosen on the river's edge such station, that the distance of the stream alone did separate me, there I stayed my steps for clearer prospect, and beheld the flames go onward, leaving as they went, the air behind them painted as with trail of liveliest pencils. So distinct were marked all those 7 listed colours, whence the sun maketh his bow, and Cynthia her zone. These streaming gonfalons did flow beyond my vision, and 10 paces, as I guess, parted the outermost. Beneath a sky so beautiful came fowl and 20 elders, by 2 and 2, with flower de luce crowned. All sang one song, Blessed be thou among the daughters of Adam, and thy loveliness blessed forever. After that the flowers, and the fresh herblets on the opposite brink, were free from that elected race. As light in heaven doth second light, came after them 4 animals, each crowned with verdurous leaf. With 6 wings each was plumbed, the plumage full of eyes, and the eyes of Argus would be such, were they endued with life. Reader, more rhymes will not waste in shadowing forth their form, for other need no straitens that in this I may not give my bounty room. But read Ezekiel, for he paints them from the north how he beheld them come by Chebar's flood, in whirlwind, cloud, and fire, and even such as thou shalt find them charactered by him, here were they, save as to the pennons. There, from him departing, John accords with me. The space, surrounded by the 4, enclosed a car triumphal. On 2 wheels it came drawn at a griffin's neck, and he above stretched either wing uplifted, tween the midst and the 3 listed hues, on each side 3, so that the wings did cleave or injure none, and out of sight they rose. The members, far as he was bird, were golden, white the rest with vermeil intervened. So beautiful a car in Rome ne'er graced Augustus' pomp, or Africanus. E'en the suns itself were poor to this, that chariot of the sun erroneous, which in blazing ruin fell at Tellus's prayer devout, by the just doom mysterious of all-seeing Jove. 3 nymphs at the right wheel came circling in smooth dance, the one so ruddy that her form had scarce been known within a furnace of clear flame. The next did look as if the flesh and bones were emerald. Snow new fallen seemed the third. Now seemed the white to lead, the ruddy now, and from her song who led, the others took their treasure, swift or slow. At the other wheel, a band quaternion, each in purple clad, advanced with festal step, as of them one the rest conducted, one upon whose front 3 eyes were seen. In rear of all this group, 2 old men I beheld, dissimilar in raiment, but in port and gesture like, solid and mainly grave, of whom the one did show himself some favoured counsellor of the great Koan, him whom nature made to serve the costliest creature of her tribe. His fellow marked an opposite intent, bearing a sword, whose glitterance and keen edge, e'en as I viewed it with the flood between, appalled me. Next 4 others I beheld, of humble seeming, and behind them all, one single old man, sleeping as he came, with a shrewd visage. And these 7, each like the first troop were habited, but wore no braid of lilies on their temples wreathed. Rather with roses and each vermeil flower, a sight but little distant, might have sworn that they were all on fire above their brow. When as the car was o'er against me straight, was heard a thundering, at whose voice it seemed the chosen multitude were stayed, for there, with the first ensigns, made they solemn halt. Canto 30. Soon as the polar light, which never knows setting nor rising, nor the shadowy veil of other cloud than sin, fair ornament of the first heaven, to duty each one there safely convoying, as that lower doth the steersman to his port, stood firmly fixed. Forthwith the saintly tribe, who in the van between the griffin and its radiance came, did turn them to the car, as to their rest. And one, as if commissioned from above, in holy chant thrice shorted forth aloud, Come, spouse, from Libanus, and all the rest took up the song. At the last audit, so the blessed shall rise from forth his cavern, each uplifting lightly his new-vested flesh, as on the sacred litter, at the voice authoritative of that elder, sprang 100 ministers and messengers of life eternal. Blessed thou who comest, and oh, they cried, from full hands scatter ye unwithering lilies, and so saying cast flowers overhead and round them on all sides. I have beheld ere now at break of day the eastern clime all roseate, and the sky opposed, one deep and beautiful serene, and the sun's face so shaded, and with mists attempered at lids rising, that the eye long while endured the sight, thus in a cloud of flowers, that from those hands angelic rose, and down within and outside of the car, fell showering in white veil with olive wreathed, A virgin in my view appeared beneath green mantle, robed in hue of living flame, and o'er my spirit, that in former days within her presence had abode so long, no shuddering terror crept. Mine eyes no more had knowledge of her, yet there moved from her a hidden virtue, at whose touch awaked the power of ancient love was strong within me. No sooner on my vision streaming smote the heavenly influence which years past, and e'en in childhood thrilled me, than towards Virgil I turned me to leftward, panting like a babe that flees for refuge to his mother's breast, if aught have terrified or worked him woe, and would have cried, "There is no dram of blood that doth not quiver in me, the old flame throws out clear tokens of reviving fire." But Virgil had bereaved us of himself, Virgil my best-loved father, Virgil he to whom I gave me up for safety, nor all our prime mother lost, availed to save my undewed cheeks from blur of soiling tears. Dante, weep not that Virgil leaves thee, nay, weep thou not yet, behooves thee feel the edge of other sword, and thou shalt weep for that. As to the prow or stern, some admiral paces the deck, inspiriting his crew, when mid the sail yards all hands ply aloof. Thus on the left side of the car I saw, turning me at the sound of mine own name, which here I am compelled to register, the Virgin stationed, who before appeared veiled in that festive shower angelical. Towards me across the stream she bent her eyes, though from her brow the veil descending, bound with foliage of Minerva, suffered not that I beheld her clearly. Then with act full royal still insulting o'er her thrall, added as one who speaking keepeth back the bitterest saying to conclude the speech, "Observe me well. I am in sooth, I am Beatrice. What? And hast thou deigned at last approach the mountain? Knewest not, O man, thy happiness is whole." Down fell mine eyes on the clear fount, but there myself espying recoiled, and sought the greensward. Such a weight of shame was on my forehead. With a mien of that stern majesty, which doth surround mother's presence to her awe-struck child, she looked. A flavor of such bitterness was mingled in her pity. There her words brake off, and suddenly the angels sang, "In thee, O gracious Lord, my hope hath been," but went no farther than, "Thou, Lord, hast set my feet in ample room." As snow that lies amidst the living rafters on the back of Italy congealed when drifted high and closely piled by rough Sclavonian blasts, breathe but the land whereon no shadow falls, and straightway melting it distills away, like a fire-wasted taper. Thus was I without a sigh or tear, or ever these did sing, that with the chiming of heaven's sphere, still in their warbling chime, but when the strain of dulcet symphony expressed for me their soft compassion, more than could the words, "Virgin, why so consum'st him?" Then the ice, congealed about my bosom, turned itself to spirit and water, and with anguish forth gushed through the lips and eyelids from the heart. Upon the chariot's right edge still she stood, immovable, and thus addressed her words to those bright semblances with pity touched. "Ye in the eternal day your vigils keep, so that nor night nor slumber with close stealth conveys from you a single step in all the goings-on of life. Thence with more heed I shape mine answer, for his ear intended, who there stands weeping, that the sorrow now may equal the transgression. Not alone through operation of the mighty orbs, that mark each seed to some predestined aim, as with aspect or fortunate or ill the constellations meet, but through benign largesse of heavenly graces, which rain down from such a height as mocks our vision. This man was in the freshness of his being, such, so gifted virtually, that in him all better habits wondrously had thrived. The more of kindly strength is in the soil, so much doth evil seed and lack of culture mar it the more, and make it run to wildness. These looks sometime upheld him, for I showed my youthful eyes, and led him by their light in upright walking. Soon as I had reached the threshold of my second age, and changed my mortal for immortal, then he left me, and gave himself to others. When from flesh to spirit I had risen, and increase of beauty and of virtue circled me, I was less dear to him, and valued less. His steps were turned into deceitful ways, following false images of good, that make no promise perfect. Nor availed me aught to sue for inspirations, with the which I, both in dreams of night and otherwise, did call him back. Of them so little recked him, such depth he fell, that all device was short of his preserving, save that he should view the children of perdition. To this end I visited the purlieus of the dead, and one who hath conducted him thus high received my supplications urged with weeping. It were a breaking of God's high decree, if Lethe should be passed, and such food tasted without the cost of some repentant tear. Canto 31. O thou, her words she thus without delay resuming, turned their point on me, to whom they but with lateral edge seemed harsh before. Say thou who standst beyond the holy stream, if this be true, a charge so grievous needs thine own avowal. On my faculty such strange amazement hung, the voice expired imperfect, ere its organs gave it birth. A little space refraining, then she spake. What dost thou muse on? Answer me. The wave on thy remembrances of evil yet hath done no injury. A mingled sense of fear and of confusion from my lips did such a yea produce as needed help of vision to interpret. As when breaks in act to be discharged, a crossbow bent beyond its pitch, both nerve and bow o'erstretched, the flagging weapon feebly hits the mark. Thus, tears and sighs forth gushing, did I burst beneath the heavy load, and thus my voice was slackened on its way. She straight began, When my desire invited thee to love the good, which sets a bound to our aspirings, what bar of thwarting fosse or linked chain did meet thee, that thou so shouldst quit the hope of further progress? Or what bait of ease or promise of allurement led thee on elsewhere, that thou elsewhere shouldst rather wait? A bitter sigh I drew, then scarce found voice to answer. Hardly to these sounds my lips gave utterance, wailing, Thy fair looks withdrawn, things present with deceitful pleasures, turned my steps aside. She answering spake, Hadst thou been silent or denied what thou avowest, thou hadst not hid thy sin the more. Such eye observes it. But whene'er the sinner's cheek breaks forth into the precious streaming tears of self-accusing, in our court the wheel of justice doth run counter to the edge. Howe'er that thou mayst profit by thy shame for errors past, and that henceforth more strength may arm thee, when thou hearest the siren voice, lay thou aside the motive to this grief, and lend attentive ear, while I unfold how opposite a way my buried flesh should have impelled thee. Never didst thou spy in art or nature aught so passing sweet, as were the limbs that in their beauteous frame enclosed me, and are scattered now in dust. If sweetest thing thus failed thee with my death, what afterward of mortal should thy wish have tempted? When thou first hadst felt the dart of perishable things, in my departing for better realms, thy wing thou shouldst have pruned to follow me, and never stooped again to bide a second blow for a slight girl, or other gaud as transient and as vain. The new and inexperienced bird awaits, twice it may be, or thrice the fowler's aim. But in the sight of one whose plumes are full, in vain the net is spread, the arrow winged. I stood as children silent and ashamed, stand listening with their eyes upon the earth, acknowledging their fault and self-condemned. And she resumed, If but to hear thus pains thee, raise thou thy beard, and lo, what sight shall do? With less reluctance yields a sturdy home, rent from its fibers by a blast, that blows from off the pole or from Iarbas' land, than I at her behest my visage raised. And thus the face denoting by the beard, I marked the secret sting her words conveyed. No sooner lifted I mine aspect up, than downward sunk that vision I beheld of goodly creatures vanish, and mine eyes, yet unassured and wavering, bent their light on Beatrice. Towards the animal who joins two natures in one form she turned, and even under shadow of her veil, and parted by the verdant rill that flowed between, in loveliness appeared as much her former self surpassing, as on earth all others she surpassed. Remorseful goads shot sudden through me. Each thing else, the more its love had late beguiled me, now the more I was loathsome. On my heart so keenly smote the bitter consciousness, that on the ground o'erpowered I fell, and what my state was then, she knows who was the cause. When now my strength flowed back, returning outward from the heart, the lady, whom alone I first had seen, I found above me. Loose me not, she cried, loose not thy hold, and lo, had dragged me high as to my neck into the stream, while she, still as she drew me after, swept along, swift as a shuttle, bounding o'er the wave. The blessed shore approaching then was heard so sweetly, to asperges me, that I may not remember, much less tell the sound. The beauteous dame, her arms expanding, clasped my temples and emerged me, where it was fit the wave should drench me, and thence raising up, within the fourfold dance of lovely nymphs presented me so laved, and with their arm they each did cover me. Here are we nymphs, and in the heaven are stars. Or ever earth was visited of Beatrice, we appointed for her handmaids, tended on her. We to her eyes will lead thee, but the light of gladness that is in them, well to scan, those yonder three, of deeper ken than ours, thy sight shall quicken. Thus began their song, and then they led me to the griffin's breast, while turned toward us, Beatrice stood. Spare not thy vision. We have stationed thee before the emeralds, whence love erewhile hath drawn his weapons on thee. As they spake, 1,000 fervent wishes riveted mine eyes upon her beaming eyes, that stood still fixed toward the griffin motionless. As the sun strikes a mirror, even thus within those orbs the twofold being shone, forever varying in one figure now reflected, now in other. Reader, muse. How wondrous in my sight it seemed to mark a thing, albeit steadfast in itself, yet in its imaged semblance mutable, full of amaze and joyous, while my soul fed on the viand, whereof still desire grows with satiety, the other three with gesture that declared a loftier line, advanced. To their own carol on they came, dancing in festive ring angelical. Turn, Beatrice, was their song. O turn thy saintly sight on this thy faithful one, who to behold thee many a wearisome pace hath measured. Gracious at our prayer vouchsafe, unveil to him thy cheeks, that he may mark thy second beauty now concealed. O splendor, O sacred light eternal, who is he so pale with musing in Pierian shades, or with that fount so lavishly imbued, whose spirit should not fail him in the essay to represent thee such as thou didst seem, when under cope of the still chiming heaven thou gavest to open air thy charms revealed. Canto 32. Mine eyes, with such an eager coveting, were bent to rid them of their 10 years' thirst, no other sense was waking, and e'en they were fenced on either side from heed of aught, so tangled in its customed toils that smile of saintly brightness drew me to itself, when forcibly toward the left my sight, the sacred virgins turned, for from their lips I heard the warning sounds, too fixed a gaze. A while my vision labored, as when late upon the o'er-strained eyes the sun hath smote. But soon to lesser object, as the view was now recovered, lesser in respect to that excess of sensible, whence late I had perforce been sundered. On their right I marked that glorious army wheel, and turn, against the sun and sevenfold lights their front. As when their bucklers for protection raised, a well-ranged troop, with portly banners curled, wheel circling, ere the whole can change their ground. E'en thus the goodly regiment of heaven proceeding, all did pass us, ere the car had sloped his beam. Attendant at the wheels the damsels turned, and on the griffin moved the sacred burden, with a pace so smooth, no feather on him trembled. The fair dame who through the wave had drawn me, companied by Statius and myself, pursued the wheel, whose orbit rolling marked a lesser arch. Through the high wood now void, the more her blame who by the serpent was beguiled, I passed with step in cadence to the harmony angelic. Onward had we moved, as far perchance as arrow at 3 several flights full-winged had sped, when from her station down descended Beatrice. With one voice all murmured Adam, circling next a plant despoiled of flowers and leaf on every bough. Its tresses, spreading more as more they rose, were such as midst their forest wilds for height the Indians might have gazed at. Blessed thou, Griffin, whose beak hath never plucked that tree pleasant to taste, for hence the appetite was warped to evil. Round the stately trunk thus shouted forth the rest, to whom returned the animal twice gendered, Yea, for so the generation of the just are saved. And turning to the chariot pole, to foot he drew it of the widowed branch, and bound there left unto the stalk whereon it grew. As when large floods of radiance from above stream, with that radiance mingled, which ascends next after setting of the scaly sign, our plants then burgeon, and each wears anew his wonted colours, ere the sun have yoked beneath another star his flamy steeds. Thus putting forth a hue, more faint than rose, and deeper than the violet, was renewed the plant, erewhile in all its branches bare. Unearthly was the hymn, which then arose. I understood it not, nor to the end endured the harmony. Had I the skill to pencil forth, how closed the unpitying eyes slumbering, when Syrinx warbled, eyes that paid so dearly for their watching, then like painter, that with a model paints, I might design the manner of my falling into sleep. But fain who will the slumber cunningly, I pass it by to when I waked, and tell how suddenly a flash of splendor rent the curtain of my sleep, and one cries out, "Arise, what dost thou?" As the chosen three on Tabor's mount, admitted to behold the blossoming of that fair tree, whose fruit is coveted of angels, and doth make perpetual feast in heaven, to themselves returning at the word, whence deeper sleeps were broken, that they their tribe diminished saw, both Moses and Elias gone, and changed the stole their master wore. Thus to myself returning, over me beheld I stand the piteous one, who crossed the stream had brought my steps. "And where," all doubting, I exclaimed, "is Beatrice?" "See her," she replied, "beneath the fresh leaf seated on its root. Behold the associate choir that circles her, the others with a melody more sweet and more profound, journeying to higher realms upon the griffin tend. If there her words were closed, I know not, but mine eyes had now ta'en view of her, by whom all other thoughts were barred admittance. On the very ground alone she sat, as she had there been left a guard upon the wain, which I beheld bound to the twiform beast. The 7 nymphs did make themselves a cloister round about her, and in their hands upheld those lights secure from blast septentrion and the gusty south. A little while thou shalt be forester here, and citizen shalt be forever with me, of that true Rome, wherein Christ dwells a Roman to profit the misguided world. Keep now thine eyes upon the car, and what thou seest, take heed thou write, returning to that place. Thus Beatrice, at whose feet inclined devout, at her behest my thought and eyes, I, as she bade, directed. Never fire with so swift motion forth a stormy cloud leaped downward from the welkin's farthest bound, as I beheld the bird of Jove descending pounce on the tree, and as he rushed the rind disparting crush beneath him buds much more and leaflets. On the car with all his might he struck, whence staggering like a ship it reeled, at random driven to starboard now, o'ercome and now to larboard by the vaulting waves. Next springing up into the chariot's womb a fox I saw, with hunger seeming pined of all good food. But for his ugly sins the saintly maid rebuking him, away scampering he turned, fast as his hide-bound corpse would bear him. Next, from whence before he came, I saw the eagle dart into the hull of the car, and leave it with his feathers lined. And then a voice, like that which issues forth from heart with sorrow rived, did issue forth from heaven, and O poor bark of mine, it cried, how badly art thou freighted. Then it seemed that the earth opened between either wheel, and I beheld a dragon issue thence, that through the chariot fixed his forked train, and like a wasp that draggeth back the sting, so drawing forth his baleful train, he dragged part of the bottom forth and went his way, exulting. What remained as lively turf with green herb, so did clothe itself with plumes, which haply had with purpose chaste and kind been offered, and therewith were clothed the wheels, both one and other, and the beam so quickly a sigh were not breathed sooner. Thus transformed, the holy structure through its several parts did put forth heads, 3 on the beam, and 1 on every side, the first like oxen horned, but with a single horn upon their front, the 4, like monster sight hath never seen. Or it methought there sat, secure as rock on mountain's lofty top, a shameless whore, whose ken roved loosely round her. At her side, asked were that none might bear her off, I saw a giant stand, and ever and anon they mingled kisses. But her lustful eyes chancing on me to wander, that fell minions scourged her from head to foot all o'er, then full of jealousy and fierce with rage, unloosed the monster, and dragged on so far across the forest, that from me its shades alone shielded the harlot and the new-formed brute. Canto 33. The heathen lord are come, responsive thus, the trinal now, and now the virgin band quaternion, their sweet psalmody began, weeping, and Beatrice listened, sad and sighing to the song, in such a mood, that Mary, as she stood beside the cross, was scarce more changed. But when they gave her place to speak, then risen upright on her feet, she, with a colour glowing bright as fire, did answer, Yet a little while, and ye shall see me not, and my beloved sisters again a little while, and ye shall see me. Before her then she marshalled all the 7, and beckoning only motioned me, the dame, and that remaining sage, to follow her. So on she passed, and had not set, I ween, her 10th step to the ground, when with mine eyes her eyes encountered, and with visage mild, "So mend thy pace," she cried, "that if my words address thee, thou mayst still be aptly placed to hear them." Soon as duly to her side I now had hastened. "Brother," she began, "why makest thou no attempt at questioning, as thus we walk together?" Like to those who, speaking with too reverent an awe before their betters, draw not forth the voice alive unto their lips, befell me shall that I in sounds imperfect thus began. "Lady, what I have need of that thou knowest, and what will suit my need." She answering thus, "Of fearfulness and shame I will that thou henceforth do rid thee, that thou speak no more as one who dreams. Thus far be taught of me. The vessel which thou saw'st the serpent break was and is not. Let him who hath the blame hope not to scare God's vengeance with a sop. Without an heir forever shall not be that eagle, he who left the chariot plumbed, which monster made it first and next a prey. Plainly I view, and therefore speak, the stars e'en now approaching, whose conjunction, free from all impediment and bar, brings on a season, in the which one sent from God, 505 and 10 do mark him out. That foul one, and the accomplice of her guilt, the giant, both shall slay. And if perchance my saying, dark as Themis or as Sphinx, fail to persuade thee, since like them it foils the intellect with blindness, yet ere long events shall be the naiads that will solve this knotty riddle, and no damage light on flock or field. Take heed, and as these words by me are uttered, teach them even so to those who live that life, which is a race to death. And when thou writest them, keep in mind not to conceal how thou hast seen the plant, that twice hath now been spoiled. This whoso robs, this whoso plucks with blasphemy of deed sins against God, who for his use alone creating hallowed it. For taste of this, in pain and in desire 5,000 years, and upward the first soul did yearn for him, who punished in himself the fatal gust. Thy reason slumbers, if it deem this height and summit thus inverted of the plant without due cause, and were not vainer thoughts, as Elsa's numbing waters to thy soul, and their fond pleasures had not dyed it dark, as Pyramus the mulberry thou hadst seen, in such momentous circumstance alone, God's equal justice morally implied in the forbidden tree. But since I mark thee in understanding hardened into stone, and to that hardness spotted too and stained, so that thine eye is dazzled at my word, I will that if not written, yet at least painted thou take it in thee, for the cause, that one brings home his staff enwreathed with palm. I thus, as wax by seal that changeth not its impress, now is stamped my brain by thee. But wherefore soars thy wished-for speech so high beyond my sight, that loses it the more it strains to reach it? To the end that thou mayest know, she answered straight, the school that thou hast followed, and how far behind, when following my discourse its learning halts, and mayst behold your art, from the divine as distant, as the disagreement is twixt earth and heaven's most high and rapturous orb. I not remember, I replied, that ere I was estranged from thee, nor for such fault doth conscience chide me. Smiling she returned, if thou canst not remember, call to mind how lately thou hast drunk of Lethe's wave, and sure as smoke doth indicate a flame, in that forgetfulness itself conclude, blame from thy alienated will incurred. From henceforth verily my words shall be as naked as will suit them to appear in thy unpractised view. More sparkling now, and with retarded course the sun possessed the circle of midday, that varies still as the aspect varies of each several clime, when as one, sent in vaward of a troop for escort, pauses if perchance he spy vestige of somewhat strange and rare. So paused the sevenfold band, arriving at the verge of a dun umbrage hoar, such as is seen, beneath green leaves and gloomy branches, off to overbrow a bleak and alpine cliff. And where they stood before them, as it seemed, Tigris and Euphrates both beheld, forth from one fountain issue, and like friends, linger at parting. O enlightening beam, O glory of our kind, beseech thee say what water this, which from one source derived itself removes to distance from itself. To such entreaty answer thus was made, entreat Matilda that she teach thee this. And here as one who clears himself of blame imputed, the fair dame returned. Of me he this and more hath learnt, and I am safe that Lethe's water hath not hid it from him. And Beatrice, Some more pressing care that oft the memory reaves, perchance hath made his mind's eye dark. But lo, where Eunoe cows, lead thither, and as thou art wont, revive his fainting virtue. As a courteous spirit that proffers no excuses, but as soon as he hath token of another's will, makes it his own. When she had ta'en me, thus the lovely maiden moved her on, and called to Statius with an air most ladylike, Come thou with him. Were further space allowed, then, reader, might I sing, though but in part, that beverage with whose sweetness I had ne'er been sated. But since all the leaves are full, appointed for this second strain, mine art with warning bridle checks me. I return from the most holy wave, regenerate, if'n as new plants renewed with foliage new, pure and made apt for mounting to the stars.